Hey, guys, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've trudged through a muddy ST. That smells like a blend of horse smoke and questionable soup. It's raining, of course, or just finished, so everything's slick, including your only pair of shoes. You're tired, you're hungry, and you've nearly been run over by a cart full of turnips twice. You need a drink. So, how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? There are no glowing signs, no Yelp reviews, and certainly no GPS. What you do have are your ears. Just follow the noise. Somewhere past the blacksmith's forge and the fishmonger yelling about his fresh river eels is a chorus of laughter, shouting, and someone aggressively singing about a goose. And there it is, a crooked wooden building, leaning slightly as if even the architecture has had one too many. Hanging above the door is a wooden sign, barely legible, with a crude painting of, is that a barrel or a bear? Or maybe both. Either way, this is it. Welcome to the tavern. The front step is slick with ale, and as you push open the heavy iron hinge door, it lets out a creak so long and dramatic it might qualify as its own form of entertainment. Instantly, warm air and the rich perfume of smoke, wet wool, stale beer, and mystery meat hit your face like a drunken handshake. You've made it. Inside, the ceiling is low enough to make tall men duck and drunk men bump their heads. The floor is dirt. Not metaphorically, literally, though someone's laid down straw in an attempt to pretend it's cleaner. It isn't. There are no private booths, no waiters with menus, and no such thing as quiet conversation. This is a medieval tavern, and it only comes in two settings, rowdy and closed due to fire. You spot an open seat at a lopsided bench near the hearth, but it's wet with what you don't ask. Someone nearby is arguing about a stolen chicken. Another is passed out with a ladle still in his hand. A one-eyed dog gnaws on a bone under a table like he pays rent there. And this friend is just the entrance. You've only just arrived and already it smells like a night to remember or forget. As the heavy tavern door slams shut behind you, the darkness wraps around your senses like a damp wool blanket warm. Uncomfortable and slightly suspicious, your eyes adjust slowly. Candlelight flickers against soot-stained walls, casting dancing shadows that make even the chairs look like they might pick a fight. The hearth blazes in the far corner, doubling as both heating and open flame hazard. Smoke drifts lazily in the air, not quite escaping through the chimney that might be stuffed with a dead crow. But what hits you hardest isn't the noise or the heat. It's the smell. A medieval tavern scent is less aromatic and more emotional trauma. The top notes are ale, warm, sour, and splashed liberally across every surface. Beneath that sweat, years of it. Human, horse, and maybe something mythical. Add a hint of moldy bread, wet straw, and a whisper of boiled onions, and you have a blend no perfumer has dared bottle. The tables are carved with years of initials, crude drawings, and knife scars. They wobble with a kind of stubborn pride. The benches creak under the weight of muddy boots, thick cloaks, and questionable decisions. The floor dirt is promised, but layered with straw, meant to soak up spills, spit, and the occasional unconscious customer. You step carefully. One wrong move, and your foot sinks into something with a texture best left undescribed. The crowd is a living, breathing organism. Loud laughter erupts in one corner, while two men argue about the price of a pig in another. A woman slams a mug down hard enough to spill half her drink, and no one even flinches. A man at the next table stares at you with the dazed look of someone who's either thinking very deeply or forgetting how chairs work. Someone nearby sneezes. The entire left side of the room collectively leans away and still. Despite the overwhelming assault on your modern sensibilities, there's something welcoming here. The tavern is alive. It's rough, raw, and completely unfiltered. The medieval version of a community hub, minus the hygiene, and with 400% more shouting, you find your seat. It's a bit damp. It's probably cursed, but for now, it's yours at first glance. The tavern's layout looks like someone arranged the furniture during an earthquake and then just decided to leave it that way. There's no blueprint, no bar area, no cozy booths in the back. Just a sprawling, uneven spillage of tables, benches, barrels, and the occasional wooden crate being passed off a seat. Everything is too close together or too far apart, depending on how drunk you are. The hearth is the only real centerpiece. A big open fire roaring against one wall, doing its best to provide warmth, light, and a healthy dose of indoor smoke inhalation. Around it, people crowd in for comfort, like moths with mugs. Those with the best seats hog the warmth. Those without? Well, that's what ale is for. The bar, if you can call it that. It is usually just a thick wooden plank resting across two barrels, sagging under the weight of jugs, mugs, and elbows. Behind it stands the tavern keeper, multitasking between pouring drinks, yelling orders, and giving that one guy in the corner the death stare of you still haven't paid for last Tuesday. There are no menus. You ask what's available and brace yourself. The answer is usually ale or shut up and wait. A narrow staircase, possibly original, definitely splintery, leads to the upstairs rooms. If you squint, you can see a boot hanging from one of the railing posts. No one's entirely sure if it's decorative or a warning. Some taverns have a back room. It might be for storage, it might be for illegal gambling, or it might be where the last person who insulted the barmaid was taken, never to be seen again. It's best not to ask. The walls are stained with candle soot, the windows are covered with greasy cloth or animal hide, and every surface has been thoroughly polished by the elbows, boots, and spilled drinks of generations past. And maybe a chicken. Somehow, despite the chaos or because of it, it works. Everyone knows where to go, how to sit, when to shout, and when to duck. It's not organized, but it is alive. Every medieval tavern has a ruler, and it's not the local lord or the tax collector. It's the tavern keeper. They may not wear a crown, but don't be fooled, this person runs the show. Equal part chef, server, accountant, babysitter, and executioner of barroom justice. The tavern keeper is a one-person institution, and they take no nonsense. If it's a man, he's likely built like a barrel with arms, grizzled, grumpy, and carved from cured meat and bad decisions. If it's a woman, and often it is, she's sharper than a blacksmith's file and can silence a room with a single look. Either way, they've seen everything, heard worse, and cleaned blood out of straw before breakfast. They greet regulars with a nod, strangers with suspicion, and troublemakers with a tankard to the head. Behind the bar, they keep mental tabs on who's paid, who owes, and who's had 3 too many. And they do it all without writing anything down, because medieval literacy might be rare, but tavern memory is terrifying. The tavern keeper sets the tone. If they're in a good mood, the place hums. If they're in a bad mood, you'd better drink fast and keep your jokes to yourself. They're the referee in every argument, the judge in every cheating scandal, and the first to grab a club when a fight breaks out. You do not mess with the tavern keeper. They also know everything. Who's in debt? Who's having an affair? Who arrived in town under a false name? Need information? Bribe the barkeep? Need protection? Sit near them? Need a favor? Better hope you didn't break a mug last week. Some have a helper, a son, daughter, spouse, or orphan they sort of adopted and now may carry barrels twice their weight. These assistants run drinks, mop floors, and try not to spill anything or get stepped on by drunks. So while the tavern may feel like chaos to you, it's actually a very delicate ecosystem. And in the center, commanding it all like a storm god in an apron, stands the one person keeping the ale flowing and a roof from collapsing into a riot, the tavern keeper. So you finally settle onto a creaky bench, dodging elbows and spilled stew. Your throat's dry, your boots are damp, and it's time for the main event, the drink. But don't expect a wine list or a polished mug. This is a medieval tavern. Your choices are limited, lukewarm, and possibly life-threatening. Let's start with the classic ale. Unfiltered, unpasteurized, and usually brewed in the back room where the dog sleeps. It's thick, cloudy, and often comes with floaties, bits of grain, yeast, or possibly a chunk of the previous customer's mustache. It's not cold because there's no ice, and you don't ask how long it's been sitting in the barrel. You just drink and hope. Next up, mead. Honey wine. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, it's sweet, strong, and occasionally explosive. If the tavern keeper made it themselves, it might be delicious, or it might taste like regret and be venom. It's usually served to nobles. Wedding guests, or that one bard who insists on being paid in gold or mead. Then there's cider made from apples that were either freshly picked or dropped on the ground 3 weeks ago. Sharp, tangy, and served in cracked mugs that may double as soup bowls by morning. It's the drink of choice in orchard-rich regions, or for those who want something just alcoholic enough to forget the smell of the man sitting beside them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you're in southern Europe or the nobility's in town, it's likely watered down, soured, and served with a side of sarcasm. Good wine is reserved for lords, bishops, and the merchant who just sold 12 crates of salt. And water? That's a bold choice, because half the time it's teeming with invisible death. Boiling costs fuel, and clean wells are rare. That's why even children drink ale. It's not about the buzz. It's about not dying of dysentery before age 8. No one's measuring shots or crafting cocktails here. You drink from mugs made of wood, clay, or tin. Some still have last night's stew in them. You raise your mug, sniff it, and sip. It's warm, it's bitter, and somehow it's perfect. Because in the medieval tavern, if it's wet and won't kill you immediately, it's a fine vintage. So you barely survive the drink. Now your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten since sunrise, and your last meal was mostly barley and sadness. Time to eat, but don't get excited. There's no menu, no waiter, and absolutely no one asking if you have any dietary restrictions. You don't order food in a medieval tavern. You ask what's left, then hope it's hot and only vaguely mysterious. The star of the tavern table is usually pottage, a thick stew made from whatever grains. Vegetables and questionable proteins were lying around that day. It's been cooking in the same pot since Monday, and it's now Thursday. New ingredients are added daily. Nothing is removed. It's less of a meal and more of a culinary time capsule. If meat is involved, congratulations. It's probably a rabbit, pigeon, or the unlucky chicken who wandered too close to the fire. If it's game meat, it might be delicious, or it might be aged past reason, and seasoned with desperation. Your bowl is made of wood or clay. Your spoon, either your own or your fingers. Most people carry their own knife, so eating is a BYO cutlery affair. And don't expect napkins, just the sleeve of your tunic or a shared rag that's seen things it'll never forget. Bread is also on offer. It's tough, dark, and heavy, more a weapon than a food. If it's soft, it was baked today. If it's hard, it was baked last week. Either way, it pairs well with cheese that smells like an old boot and has started developing its own personality. Sometimes there's salted fish, sometimes pickled eggs. Occasionally you'll find a tavern offering a special, which is just a fancier way of saying we had too much of this lying around. Flavor optional, texture unpredictable. Still in the flickering firelight. With noise all around and the warmth of food in your hands, not bad. It's filling. It's hot. And if you don't think too hard about what's floating in your bowl, it might even be comforting. You're not here for fine dining. You're here to eat like a survivor. Once you've found your seat, ideally one without a knife stuck in it, you start to notice the real entertainment, the people. A medieval tavern is the original social media feed, loud, chaotic, half true, and fully committed to oversharing. To your left, there's a red-faced farmer already deep into his fourth ale, retelling the same story about his cow giving birth sideways. He slaps your shoulder mid-sentence like you're a lifelong friend or a good replacement for the pig he usually drinks with. At the far end of the room, a hooded stranger sits in shadows, nursing a drink slowly. He could be a runaway monk or a bandit, or just really bad eye contact. Either way, you're not making small talk with him unless you want to disappear behind the stables. Near the hearth, a soldier in battered armor is regaling a group with tales of battle. His story involves dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking sword. It's definitely false. No one cares. His tankard is full, and his audience is laughing. There's a merchant, loud and sweaty, shouting prices for grain that no one asked for. Pulls gold coins from his pouch like a man begging to be robbed by midnight. A pair of locals play dice on a warped table, their expressions intense. One of them clearly cheats. The other knows and lets it happen, probably saving the fight for when his ale runs out. A bard strums in the corner, voice cracking on the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously like one he just made up. No one minds. He's wearing pants and he's in tune. That's already better than last night's guy. Women wander through the crowd, some tavern staff, others working their own business. They're sharp-eyed, confident, and absolutely not to be trifled with. They'll flirt, laugh, or knock your teeth in, depending on your tone. Children occasionally dart between legs, swiping leftover bread or coins. No one stops them. It's just part of the rhythm. Everyone is watching, drinking, plotting, and pretending not to notice the man slumped under the table. This tavern isn't just a place to eat and drink. It's a living, breathing performance. And tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget lutes and ballads for a moment. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern isn't a song. It's a symphony of chaos. It begins with a clink of mugs, dozens of them slamming against wood in celebration, negotiation, or drunken misfire. Some clang cheerfully, others shatter completely. Both are met with cheers. Then comes the laughter. Big, loud, belly-deep laughter that sounds like it escaped from a wild boar. Most of it makes no sense. A farmer chuckles at his own joke about hay. A knight giggles at the word pottage. A monk wheezes uncontrollably every time someone says duck. You learn quickly not to ask. Voices layer over one another, each louder than the last, fighting for dominance like roosters in a coop. There's arguing, storytelling, shouting about taxes, and at least one person misquoting scripture to win a bet. The bartender yells orders while swatting flies. A barmaid shouts at a man who tried to grab her, and someone keeps repeating. Another round, like a battle cry. And in the corner, the bard. With a half-tuned lute and 3 missing strings, he plays the same 4 chords on loop, occasionally bursting into verses about lost love, found chickens, or noblemen who wore their pants backwards. No one really listens unless he starts singing about someone in the room, at which point things get very entertaining or very dangerous. Someone spills something. Someone burps loud enough to make the rafters tremble. Someone else falls off a bench and keeps talking from the floor like it's intentional. In the background, dogs bark. A goat bleats. Why is there a goat? And chairs scrape across dirt like thunder claps in a wooden cavern. It's not peaceful, but it's oddly rhythmic. Occasionally the room goes quiet. Not by choice, just a sudden lull. It lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then someone farts heroically, and the music starts again. This isn't background noise. This is the tavern's heartbeat, raw, rowdy, and relentlessly alive. If you listen closely enough, it starts to make sense, a kind of harmony born from disorder. And like the rest of the tavern, it only gets louder the longer you stay. Once the ale starts flowing and the stew starts settling, the tavern transforms. It's no longer just a place to eat and drink. It becomes a medieval casino, minus the velvet ropes, and with way more yelling. Gambling is the sport of the evening, and everyone plays, from weathered soldiers to barefoot boys with borrowed dice. There's no dealer, no pit boss, no regulation, just a cracked wooden table, a handful of copper coins, and the vague promise that someone's about to lose their dignity. Dice are the game of choice. Carved from bone, wood, or whatever was lying around, they clatter across tabletops like rolling thunder, each toss followed by a mix of cheers, groans, and accusations of witchcraft. No one trusts the dice. Everyone uses them. Then there are cards if you're in a more cultured part of town. Thick, hand-painted, worn to the edges, and always missing 1 or 2. The rules shift based on who explains them. Sometimes you're trying to get the highest number. Other times you're matching symbols or just making it up as you go. It's like poker, but with more slapping. Wages range from money to mugs to livestock. Yes, someone once bet a goat, someone else bet their boots, and someone else bet their own freedom for the night. Spoiler, he lost. The regulars are slick. They shuffle quickly, roll slowly, and smile a little too wide. Cheating. Of course, it's half the fun. A hidden die here, a marked card there, a mysterious cough when the lucky player leans in. If you win big, you buy a round or risk getting jumped. If you lose badly, you smile, pretend you meant to, and slowly push your chair back toward the door. Side games are up too. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the ever-popular who can drink the most without falling over. The winner earns applause. The loser earns a night under the table and a headache that lasts until next market day. But even when the rules are unclear and the stakes are absurd, the energy is addictive. Because in a medieval tavern, luck isn't just a game. It's a gamble with your purse, your pride, and possibly your pants. As the night deepens and the tavern fills with warmth and humidity, a new kind of performance takes the floor, one made of words, music, and confident nonsense. This is story time medieval style. A bard clears his throat in the corner, gently plucking at a half-tuned lute, the strings squeaking like old boots. He's missing a few teeth, but not a bit of confidence. With a dramatic flourish, he launches into a ballad of heartbreak and heroism. Something about a knight who fell in love with a mermaid and drowned nobly while reciting poetry. No one believes him. Everyone listens anyway. That's how it works here. Truth is optional. Entertainment is everything. Around the tables, others join in. Not bards, just patrons with ale-fueled bravery and a tale to tell. One man swears he once wrestled a bear and lived to drink about it. Another claims he saw a witch turn a cow into a goat. One-third insists he's related to Charlemagne on his mother's cousin's side. Everyone's story begins with "you won't believe this," but they're right. We don't, but we want it. Boasts become ballads. Mishaps become myths. Someone tells a joke so bad it circles back to being good. Someone else recites a poem, likely plagiarized from a monk's scroll. The room claps, hoots, or throws bread. Depending on the quality or quantity of the performance, if you're lucky, a scold or a minstrel might be passing through professionals who travel from town to town, exchanging music for coins, meals, and occasionally a place to sleep indoors. Their songs are polished, their tales long, and their ability to rile up a crowd. Dangerous. But even they know the golden rule of tavern tales. Never let facts ruin a good story. In this smoke-filled room, with the fire crackling and the mug sloshing, storytelling isn't just entertainment. It's tradition. It's a connection. It's how you make friends, enemies, and the occasional lifelong drinking partner. By midnight, half the tavern is reenacting the story of the one-legged knight who fought off 6 highwaymen with a ladle. You laugh, you cheer, you forget it's all made up. Because in a medieval tavern, every liar is a legend. If the story's good enough, as the night deepens and the ale keeps flowing, something changes in the air. A kind of boozy boldness. The bard is halfway through his 3rd song about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly everyone's feeling romantic. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtlety has left the building. It starts with eye contact, or at least one eye. Slightly squinting through a mead-induced haze, a man with 2 remaining teeth leans across a bench and slurs, "Milady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." She responds by hurling a bread crust at his forehead. The room cheers. Others try their luck more gently, offering refilled mugs, clumsy compliments, or offers to help carry a bowl of stew so it doesn't spill. Spoiler, it still spills if you're a woman in the tavern. Staff, guest, or traveling merchant. You're likely used to fending off at least 3 would-be poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and 1 man who tries to impress you by balancing a knife on his nose. Sometimes it works. Usually it ends with a black eye or an empty purse. For those actually seeking companionship, taverns offer more than just flirting. Courtesans work the room with practiced ease, knowing who is coin, who is charm, and who will pass out before making it to the stairs. Transactions are discreet, but the implications are loud. Jealous lovers? Oh yes, nothing sparks a tavern fight faster than a stolen glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing a little too hard at the bard's joke about bishops. Tables are overturned. Mugs are weaponized. A bench gets broken in half again, and yet, somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, genuine sparks fly. A shy baker's daughter and a traveling stonemason laugh over shared stew. 2 drunk farmers bond over a mutual hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something like it, survives in even the rowdiest corners, because in the medieval tavern, romance is equal parts charm, chance, and not falling face first into your bowl mid-sentence. You might win a heart. You might earn a slap. Either way, you're going to remember it, or at least hear about it the next morning. It was bound to happen. Maybe someone spilled a drink. Maybe someone accused someone else of cheating at dice. Maybe two people claimed the same bench and neither backed down. Or maybe someone said something about someone else's mother, goat, or soup. Doesn't really matter. Suddenly it's on. The tavern, once a blur of music and mugs, turns on a dime. The stool flies. A tankard crashes to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread," and launches themselves over a bench with all the grace of a drunk catapult. No one is surprised. In fact, most people don't even stop drinking. A bar fight in the Middle Ages isn't rare. It's expected. It's practically a feature. And while it sounds terrifying, it's usually more comedic than deadly. People swing wildly, miss, trip, and land in someone's dinner. Hair is pulled, beards are grabbed, shirts are torn. The tavern keeper roars like a battlefield general while holding a ladle in one hand and a club in the other. Occasionally, someone joins the fight with no idea why. They just saw action and leapt in fists first. Others place informal bets, cheer, or slide their mugs out of splash range. Weapons? Rare. Most folks know better. Pulling a blade in a tavern can turn a casual brawl into a full-blown tavern legend, and no one wants to be banned from the only place that serves hot food and warm ale. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays there. Someone else stumbles into a wall and decides that's as good a place as any to sit and rethink their life. The fight burns out like a tavern candle, suddenly and without ceremony. And here's the strange part. Once it's over, it's over. The fighters are separated, mugs are refilled, someone starts a song, and within 10 minutes, everyone is laughing again, including the guy with a bleeding nose. No grudges, no lawsuits, just bruises, stories, and maybe a new nickname like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill. Because in a medieval tavern, a good fight is just part of a good night. Messy, ridiculous, and weirdly bonding. And if no one gets hurt too badly, it's just another round of entertainment. So the brawl's over, the bard is passed out mid-ballad, and your stomach is full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider. It's time to sleep, or at least attempt to. But don't expect a feather bed and lavender-scented linens. This is a medieval tavern, not a spa. If the tavern offers lodging, it's likely a creaky staircase away upstairs, past slanted floors and beams low enough to test your skull's durability. The rooms are small, cold, and absolutely shared. Privacy doesn't exist. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some snoring like church bells, others dreaming loudly in languages you've never heard. Beds. Technically, most are straw-stuffed mattresses, thin, lumpy, and crawling with what medieval folks fondly called companions. You lay down fully clothed, boots on, dagger under your pillow, not for comfort, but for defensive strategy. Blankets are shared, so are smells, and if someone had garlic earlier, someone always has garlic. It will become an intimate part of your dreams. If you're too poor or too drunk for a room, you sleep downstairs on a bench, under a table, or just in a corner by the hearth, curled up next to a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You'll be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and maybe used as a footrest. The tavern never really quiets. Even after the last mug is drained and the last fight patched up, there's always someone muttering in their sleep, a log popping in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. And yet, somehow you drift off. It's not comfortable. It's not clean, but it's safe enough. The fire keeps the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand, and the noise becomes its own kind of lullaby, familiar, human, alive. You'll wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours you sleep in the company of travelers, rogues, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring straw. And the faint hope your boots are still there come morning. Dawn creeps in like an uninvited guest, sliding pale light through the cracks in the shutters and poking at your eyelids with merciless persistence. The tavern has changed overnight. Not quieter exactly, but quieter in a defeated sort of way. You open one eye. Someone's boot is on your chest. Someone else is mumbling in their sleep about sheep taxes. The bard is snoring under a table, clutching his lute like a lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at yesterday's bread crusts. No one questions where it came from. The fire has died down, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few patrons begin to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, and lies back down, having decided today isn't worth it. The tavern keeper is already up because of course they are clattering mugs, sweeping straw into fresh piles, reheating something in a pot that smells both inviting and slightly vengeful. They shoot a look at the bodies on the floor, then bang a ladle against a mug like a morning bell from hell. Up or out? That's your wake-up call. There's no breakfast buffet. If you're lucky, there's more pottage now, even thicker than last night. Bread is rewarmed, ale is watered down, and no one has the strength to complain. Some patrons just dunk their heads in a barrel of rainwater outside and call it clean living. You check your pouch, 2 coins and a button. Better than expected. Your boots are still here. One of them has a bite mark, but they're yours. A win. A few new faces trickle in. Early risers, travelers, workers in need of a drink before dealing with livestock, taxes, or worse, neighbors. The tavern begins to stir again, like a beast slowly waking. Someone starts retelling a story from last night. It's already changed, of course. Now there were 2 fights, and the bard's song, Summon a Ghost. Everyone nods like it's gospel. The night was chaotic. The morning is groggy, grimy, and full of regret, and yet you smile because somehow you survived it. By now, you felt the sweat, the smoke, the sticky ale under your boots. You've survived the shouting, the flirting, the pottage, and possibly a flying bench. And through all that, one thing becomes clear. The medieval tavern wasn't just a drinking hall. It was the beating heart of the community in a world with no phones, no newspapers, no social networks. The tavern was where news traveled. A merchant from the coast could share gossip from a foreign port. A soldier could describe the war from the front. A bard could sing songs that stitched people together, even if the lyrics changed every night. This was a place for connection. Farmers drank beside craftsmen. Pilgrims shared bread with thieves. Strangers became friends, or at least drinking buddies before the second round. Here, social classes blurred, rumors were born, alliances were made, and grudges were buried or fueled further, depending on how the dice rolled. The tavern was also where business happened, deals made, contracts shaken over splinters and spilled cider. It was a court, a confessional, and a theater stage all at once. You could find a job, lose your purse, get married, or start a feud in a single evening. And it offered something else, too. Something you couldn't buy at the market or pray for in a chapel. Relief from the cold, from work, from the endless seriousness of surviving medieval life. For a few hours you could sit near a fire, hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and forget, just briefly, how hard the outside world was. Even if the ale was warm, the bed was itchy, and the food had more bones than broth, the tavern gave you a sense of being alive, among the living. And in an age where everything from disease to war to a sharp winter could take you without warning, that was no small thing. So when you stepped into a medieval tavern, you weren't just buying a drink. You were buying belonging, story, and maybe, if the floor wasn't too crowded, a place to sleep where the fire still burned. Because long before cafes and pubs and coffee houses, there was the tavern. Loud, dirty, honest, and absolutely unforgettable. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in mystery. Her name means the beautiful one has come, but no one knows exactly where she came from. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named At, possibly even the sister of Akhenaten. Others argue she was a foreign princess sent to Egypt in a marriage alliance. Her origins are debated, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti appears in the historical record like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She enters Akhenaten's life not as a passive queen, but as an equal partner in a reign that would shake Egypt's religious and cultural foundations together. They would dismantle centuries of tradition, discard the pantheon of gods, and elevate the sun disk Aten as the one true deity. It was a radical, near heretical move, and Nefertiti wasn't just watching from the throne. She was leading ceremonies, making offerings, even depicted in art smiting enemies, a role typically reserved for male pharaohs, unlike other queens who were relegated to the background. Nefertiti was ever present. She appears in more artwork from the period than even Akhenaten himself. In these depictions, she isn't cloaked in subservience. She stands tall, sometimes larger than life, holding power quite literally in her hands. And in a society where pharaohs were divine, her proximity to Akhenaten, both spiritually and politically, suggested something more. Perhaps she wasn't just queen. Perhaps she was co-ruler, but this rise wasn't without tension. Egypt was not ready for the upheaval. The old priesthood resented the loss of their gods and temples. The capital moved to a new city, Akhetaten, today known as Amarna, cutting ties with the old ways. And through it all, Nefertiti was there, her figure etched into stone walls, her name sung in hymns to the sun. Yet for all her visibility in life, her death is a complete vanishing act. No tomb, no body, no confirmed end. Just silence. It's as if history, after showcasing her brilliance, suddenly chose to look away. And that, perhaps, is where her legend truly begins. To understand Nefertiti's rise, you must first meet the man who changed everything. Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He was originally Amenhotep IV, a prince in line with a 1,000-year legacy of gods and tradition. But something shifted inside him. Some call it divine inspiration, others say madness. When he became king, he turned his back on the mighty god Ammonius and declared a new truth. There was only one god worth worshipping, the sun itself, the Aten. This wasn't just a religious shift. It was an earthquake that cracked the bedrock of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a society built around temples, priests, and rituals being told overnight that their gods were false, their worship obsolete. Akhenaten didn't just preach monotheism, he enforced it. The temples of Ammonius were shut down. His name was chiseled off monuments. Statues were smashed. Entire cities were abandoned. In their place, Akhenaten built something new, Akhetaten, a city dedicated solely to Aten, where the sun would rise directly between the cliffs and bathe the city in sacred light. And through it all, Nefertiti stood at his side, not as a silent consort, but as a full participant. In the reliefs of the period, she's shown worshipping Aten with the same reverence as Akhenaten. Their daughters are often depicted with them, heads tilted toward the radiant sun. It was a family portrait, unlike anything in Egyptian art before or since. Even the style of the art changed, no longer stiff and formal, but loose, exaggerated, sometimes even intimate. The king and queen kissing, playing with their children, praying in soft robes beneath the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new world. At times, she even overshadowed her husband. Some historians believe she held real political power, maybe even acted as co-regent. There are inscriptions that refer to her as Neferneferutin, a name some believe she used when she began ruling in her own right. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity, but it was clear without Nefertiti, this revolution may not have held together as long as it did. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't take kindly to being replaced, and the people. They were quietly watching, waiting for the old order to return. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti had become more than a queen. She had become an icon, not just a beauty, but a divine femininity and royal power. Egypt had seen great queens before, almost Nefertari at Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's presence felt different. She wasn't ruling from the shadows or taking power through war. She was reshaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt beside her husband in real time as a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten's 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankersen-Parten, and others, all of whom were frequently depicted in family scenes beneath the rays of Aten. Curiously, no sons were ever confirmed. In a kingdom obsessed with lineage, this was both a political problem and a historical mystery. Was it fate? Or was something else at play? Some suggest Akhenaten may have had sons with other wives, or even more controversially, with Nefertiti herself fueling modern speculation and uncomfortable theories that range from the speculative to the salacious. What is certain is that motherhood was central to her image. In art, Nefertiti is portrayed cradling her children, their tiny arms reaching up to touch her cheeks. These aren't stiff, cold statues. These are living moments, carved in stone, intimate, emotional, radiant. In an age where pharaohs were often distant gods, Nefertiti's portrayal as a nurturing mother softened the divine, making it human. Yet there was another side to her iconography, one far more powerful. In multiple depictions, Nefertiti wears the blue crown usually reserved for male rulers. She is shown smiting enemies, riding chariots, making offerings without Akhenaten beside her. These were not symbolic gestures. This was a queen performing the sacred duties of a king. It suggests a quiet but radical truth. Nefertiti may have been preparing for something more than partnership. She may have been preparing to rule. Whispers in history suggest that after Akhenaten's health began to decline, possibly due to genetic disorders or Nefertiti took on more governing responsibility, but this is where the record starts to fade in the final years of Akhenaten's reign. She vanishes from the public eye. No fanfare, no funeral inscriptions, no confirmed burial. Did she die young? Did she fall from power? Or was she about to become something even greater than a queen? Something history tried and failed to erase? One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, etched into walls, praised in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a breath in the desert wind, she vanished. No ancient Egyptian queen had ever been so visible. Yet around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records grow eerily silent. Her name disappears from the inscriptions. Her image fades from the art. No tomb, no death announcement, no mourning scene for a woman so central to Egypt's cultural upheaval. Her absence is more than strange. It's a black hole in history. So what happened to her? One theory suggests the simplest answer. She died. Childbirth was risky, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Menkaten, also disappears from records around this time, possibly indicating a dual tragedy, a mother and daughter lost in the same dark moment. But if that were true, why no elaborate funeral, no tribute, no temple? This was a woman revered like a goddess. A quiet death doesn't fit the script. Others propose something far more political. Perhaps Nefertiti fell from favor. Maybe the tides turned within the royal court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, could have sidelined her, possibly in favor of another consort. Some suggest a co-ruler named Smenkhare. An enigmatic figure who appears briefly in a historical record may have replaced her. Was this a male heir? A half-brother? Or was Smenkhare, Nefertiti herself, under a new name? That's the most electrifying theory. But Nefertiti didn't disappear at all. She transformed. Evidence suggests someone named Neferneferuaten ruled in the final years of Akhenaten's reign. This individual used feminine grammar in inscriptions and even referenced Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti, crowned as pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the rarest ranks in Egyptian history, a female king like Hatshepsut before her. But even this theory dissolves in sand. Neferneferuaten's reign ends abruptly, and then comes a name more familiar. Tutankhaten, later Tutankhamun, a child king who would reverse his parents' reforms and restore the old gods. If Nefertiti did reign alone, it was short. And if she was Smenkhare or Neferneferuaten, she ruled as a ghost queen, visible only in hints, half-carved cartouches, and broken relics, a puzzle missing its centerpiece. And so, just as suddenly as she arrived, the most powerful woman in Egypt disappears, but her legend is just beginning to take shape. As the dust of Amanna began to settle, a new figure emerged, a boy king barely old enough to hold a scepter. His name was Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, and he would become the most famous pharaoh in the world, not for what he did in life, but for the treasures found in his untouched tomb. But what matters here is this. Who was his mother? The historical records are frustratingly silent. His father was almost certainly Akhenaten, but the identity of his mother remains shrouded in confusion. Some scholars argue that Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others speculate she may have been his biological mother, pointing to art and timing that seems to place him as a young child during her final public appearances. If Nefertiti truly bore Tutankhamun, it would make sense. His early reign was clearly guided by someone with a steady hand, and his decisions to reverse his father's religious revolution may not have been entirely his own. And that's where the intrigue deepens. Who was steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile reign? The boy king was only about 9 when he took the throne. A child can't restore a religious empire alone. Someone was behind the scenes. Someone experienced in court politics, religion, and public symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest Ai, her possible father? Or perhaps both, working together to erase the chaos of Amarna and return Egypt to its old gods? One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a woman anointing the young king, a woman with features eerily similar to Nefertiti. If that was her, it means she may not have vanished at all, but stayed at the heart of power in a more discreet form. Still, without a named tomb, without a confirmed mummy, we are left with only fragments. If she did guide Tutankhamun, her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name is gone, scrubbed from temples, left out of king lists as though someone tried to erase the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. And yet the irony is rich. Tutankhamun's fame would resurrect her image because in searching for his story, the world stumbled upon hers. For someone who stood at the center of Egypt's most radical era, queen, priestess, possible pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb. Not a single monument bears her death rites. No sarcophagus, no funerary mass, no inscription whispering her final words to the gods. It's as though she evaporated. This absence has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was embalmed, mummified, and buried with instructions for the soul's journey, how could one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history be lost? Theories abound. One possibility is that she was buried hastily and without ceremony in the waning years of the Amarna period. Perhaps her radical legacy made her dangerous in the eyes of the new regime. Her tomb may have been dismantled, her name defaced, part of the sweeping effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. After all, the return to traditional gods was swift, and vengeance in stone-cut hieroglyphs was common. Another, a more tantalizing theory, suggests her tomb was never truly lost. It was simply misidentified or still hidden. Some researchers propose that she lies within the Valley of the Kings itself, concealed behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, the famed tomb of King Tut, indicated possible hidden chambers. Was Nefertiti buried just inches away, sealed off and forgotten beneath layers of history and gold? That idea captured the world's imagination. A queen sleeping just beyond reach. Egyptologists held their breath, but further scans yielded inconclusive results. Excavations slowed, funding dried up, and once again Nefertiti retreated into myth. Yet her absence is loud. We have her images, dozens, perhaps hundreds, her likeness captured in stone and pigment. Her bust now in Berlin still gazes with unfathomable grace across museum glass, as if she knows something we don't, as if she's waiting. Every year, new digs continue in Amarna and the valley. Every year, whispers stir. Could a sealed chamber finally give up her secrets? Could a cartouche in forgotten sand spell her true name? Or is she destined to remain the eternal riddle, an unfinished sentence in the story of Egypt if history buried her? It didn't succeed for long because the search for Nefertiti never truly stopped. It only deepened. If her tomb was never found and her body never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? The answer sits behind museum glass, beneath soft lights in Berlin's News Museum, a painted limestone sculpture that has captivated the world since its rediscovery in 1912. The bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward with poise and serenity, her long neck graceful, her blue crown distinct, and her features so refined they almost feel modern. One eye is unfinished, perhaps left that way intentionally, or perhaps a forgotten detail during the workshop's final days. Yet, even incomplete, she is timeless, unforgettable. The bust was discovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in the ruins of the sculptor Thutmose's studio at Amarna. When he brushed away the dust and revealed her face, he knew instantly what he had found. In his diary, he wrote, "No use describing it. You have to see it." And once the world did, Nefertiti became not just a historical figure, but a global symbol of beauty, of power, of ancient enigma. But even her bust is not without controversy. Germany acquired the artifact during a time of loose antiquities laws, and Egypt has been requesting its return for decades to the Egyptians. She belongs home in the land whose sun once touched her skin, where she stood beneath the tin's rays. But Germany has refused. They claim her fragility makes her unsafe to travel. Others say it's about prestige. Nefertiti brings in crowds. She is, after all, their Mona Lisa. Still, her presence, wherever she may be, has changed how the world sees ancient women. She wasn't just a passive beauty. Her bust captures something regal, assertive, almost challenging. She looks like someone who held secrets, made decisions, changed the course of empires. And she did. It's remarkable how a single sculpture, delicate and silent, can resurrect someone lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something extraordinary. She became immortal, not in gold, but in human memory. The face may be still, but the story it tells continues to speak louder than ever across the centuries. Nefertiti's story lives somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we want to believe. Few figures in ancient history have inspired such relentless fascination and such a profound mystery. She is a paradox, one of the most documented women of her time, and yet still largely unknowable. Over the centuries, she's been imagined as many things. To some, she was a goddess in human form, the living embodiment of divine beauty. To others, she was a political mastermind, a force behind the throne, perhaps even the throne itself. Some have portrayed her as a romantic figure, tragically lost in the sands of revolution. Others paint her as ambitious, even ruthless, navigating a collapsing empire with elegance and calculation. But what do we truly know? We know she was more than a royal wife. Her imagery rivals that of kings. Her presence during religious rites, royal ceremonies, and even scenes of battle reveals a woman not just beside power, but wielding it. In a patriarchal world, she carved out her own space, not through rebellion, but through presence, through poise, through sheer command of the visual and spiritual language of her time. We know she was central to one of history's boldest religious shifts. While Akhenaten may have envisioned the monotheistic sun cult, it was Nefertiti who embodied it. She was the human face of a divine ideal, the bridge between the Aten above and the people below. She didn't just serve the gods. She was their image. And we know that after her disappearance, her memory was nearly erased. The backlash against Akhenaten's regime swept her name into oblivion. Her statues were smashed, her inscriptions were defaced, her role in history intentionally buried. Yet here we are, 3,000 years later, still whispering her name. Why? Because myth has a way of surviving where facts cannot. Because when a woman becomes both an icon and an enigma, she slips into a space where time can't reach her. Because sometimes the questions echo louder than the answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how Nefertiti wanted it. To be remembered, not explained. To be admired, not contained. To live forever, not as a woman of one tomb, but as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked beneath Egypt's sun. Yet her shadow still stretches across our world, etched in museum glass, whispered through academic halls, splashed across the pages of novels and screens of documentaries. Unlike most historical figures, she hasn't faded into the past. If anything, she grows larger with time. There's something irresistible about her, not just the beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's a mystery. The deliberate blank spaces in her biography feel like a challenge, a taunt, as if she's daring us to try and understand her, knowing full well we never truly will. And in that way, she's become something more than historical. She's become archetypal. Every generation reinterprets Nefertiti in its own image. In the early 20th century, she was an exotic queen, mysterious and submissive. In the feminist wave, she became a symbol of female power, an ancient ruler lost to patriarchal erasure. In modern media, she's a style icon, an African queen, a political player, even a possible pharaoh. She has lived 1,000-second lives, not through facts, but through imagination. But maybe that's the most fitting afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just about mummification. It was about memory. If your name was spoken, your image seen, your story retold, you lived on. You could travel the field of reeds, dine with the gods, and exist beyond death. Nefertiti, whether by design or by chance, has achieved that. Her name is spoken across continents. Her face is one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, though fractured, still commands attention. So in a way, her greatest legacy wasn't carved into a tomb or sealed beneath desert stone. It was this enduring curiosity. She left behind a perfect mystery, a life half seen, half erased, and wholly unforgettable. And perhaps that was her final act of power. Not just to rule an empire, not just to shape religion or raise royal daughters, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly left. She remains here in our questions, our wonder, and our need to remember the women history tried to forget. She lives not in gold or glory, but in the eternal act of being searched for. And what is more immortal than that? China, where clouds hang low and the wind hums through bamboo groves, a dragon lies coiled. But it is no myth, no fire-breathing beast of legend. This dragon is made of earth and stone, carved by centuries of calloused hands and patient vision. It is the Longji Rice Terraces, known to locals as the dragon's backbone, and its curves ripple across the mountainside like scales, shimmering with water, rice, and ancient pride. From a distance, the terraces resemble a sleeping creature. Hills ripple with rhythmic precision, each layer rising and falling like the sinew of a living form. But step closer, and you'll find something even more alive. Water flows in soft whispers along carefully dug channels. Seedlings flutter in the breeze, and at dawn the morning mist drapes the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces weren't built in haste. Their story began over 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao people, ethnic minorities with deep ties to the mountains, chose to tame the slopes rather than abandon them. Flat land was scarce, machinery was non-existent, and so they looked to the mountain and asked a simple question. How do we feed ourselves here? The answer took generations. Armed with little more than stone tools and bamboo baskets, they carved the hills inch by inch. Year by year, with each level built, they not only shaped the land, they taught it to breathe with them. Rainfall became resource, slope became sustenance. Rice, the staple of life, began to grow where gravity once ruled, and over time the terraces began to resemble a dragon in repose. Strong, eternal, sacred. This was more than agriculture. It was harmony, a silent pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain was wasted, and no part was forced to bend violently. Instead, the people worked with the earth, shaping it in curves and swells, listening to the wind following the water. Today, the dragon's backbone still feeds entire villages, but more than that, it reminds us what patience can build. In a world racing forward, here lies a dragon that was never chased, only carved. Layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the Longji Rice Terraces is to step into a world carved by persistence. There's no illusion here, no machine tracks, no corporate survey markers. What stretches across these mountains are the fingerprints of human endurance. Every curve, every slope, every drop of water has been arranged, stone by stone, with hands that knew the pulse of the land. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples first looked upon these steep and unforgiving hillsides, they did not see obstacles. They saw opportunity. The lowlands were already taken, the fertile valleys already sown. But up here, amid the rugged peaks, there was a possibility, if only they could make the earth listen. With no heavy tools, they began. Wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets of mud and rubble carried on backs worn by time. Slowly, terraces began to form horizontal veins across the mountain, held in place by hand-stacked stone walls. These weren't accidental cuts into the slope. They were calculated. Each level had to be perfectly balanced, not only to hold water, but to carry it from one tier to the next without waste. One miscalculation could cause an entire section to collapse. Too steep and the water would rush, too flat and it would stagnate. So they measured not with rulers, but with generations of intuition. Children learned from their elders. Elders watched the seasons, and the mountain in time gave in, not with surrender, but with trust. And the result? A landscape that defies nature by flowing with it. From the valley base to the cloud-kissed peaks, these terraces rise like a spiral staircase to the sky. They mirror the topography with elegance, almost as if the mountain grew them itself. But no, the mountain did not shape these curves. Humans did, with no engines, no concrete, no architectural degrees. Just time, just trial and error. Just the belief that land, no matter how steep, can be made to serve life. Today, the terraces remain functional, still farmed, still repaired, still respected. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The old ways survive not because they resist the future, but because they proved something rare. That tradition, when rooted deep enough, can outlast every storm. If the dragon's backbone is muscle and bone, then water is its blood. It flows quietly, without pumps or engines, tracing ancient channels that slip from mountaintop springs into every terrace below. This hydraulic choreography is no accident. It is the secret life of the terraces, the reason they've endured for centuries at the top of the mountain. Rainwater and natural springs are caught in narrow ditches and earthen canals. From there, gravity becomes the farmer's silent ally. The water descends through terrace after terrace, pooling gently in each field before spilling into the next. This design, fluid, seamless, ensures that every patch of rice receives what it needs. No more, no less. There are no valves, no switches. Control lies in subtle gates made of stone or wood, adjusted by hand and habit. If one terrace overflows, it could flood the next. If one leaks, a drought may follow. And so the villagers, guardians of this delicate system, walk the ridges daily, checking, adjusting, and listening to the sound of flow. It's less like farming, more like playing an instrument, one wrong note, and the whole song is off. But the water does more than feed rice. It mirrors the sky. In spring, when the terraces are first flooded, the paddies turn to glass. They reflect the clouds, the sun, even the stars on a clear night. Visitors often describe the sight as surreal, like the mountain has become a living mirror, reflecting both heaven and earth. Then comes summer. The water thickens with stalks of green. The reflection fades, replaced by movement, rippling rice plants swaying in the wind like an emerald sea. In autumn, the water glistens through the gold of ripened grain, and in winter, when farming ceases, snow and frost replace the flowing current. The dragon sleeps, but the channels remain, quiet veins awaiting spring. Time moves differently here, not by hours, but by moisture. By the first trickle of mountain thaw, by the sound of frogs returning, by the scent of wet soil. In a world that measures time in seconds, the people of Longji still measure it in seasons and drops. And so the dragon lives not in fire and flight, but in ripples of water, pulsing gently through a living masterpiece of stone and soil. Spring in the Longji Mountains begins not with blossoms, but with water. As the snow melts in the higher peaks, streams trickle downward, breathing life into the waiting terraces. The mirror-like paddies are ready, the dragon stirs, and the people prepare for the ritual that ties them to every generation before them, planting the first seed. There is no grand announcement, only quiet movement. Farmers, young and old, rise with the mist. They walk barefoot along the narrow ridges, straw hats low over their eyes, baskets balanced on their backs. The air is thick with the scent of soaked soil and mountain wind. The paddies, flooded just days earlier, now shimmer like polished jade. This is not a task for machines. It never has been. Each rice seedling, grown in nursery beds, is transplanted by hand, one by one, line by line. The workers step into the cold water and press the tender stalks into the mud with gentle fingers. It's a rhythm that feels almost sacred. Back bent, arm out, Hand press, repeat all day, sometimes for weeks. Children follow, splashing in the shallows, mimicking their elders. They learn not from textbooks, but by standing in the water, feeling the resistance of mud, learning the spacing by eye. It's how knowledge survives here, lived, not spoken. Planting is more than labor. It is a ceremony. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs are sung. In some villages, elders scatter the first handful of seedlings as a blessing. Every field planted is a promise to the land, to the ancestors, to the children yet to come. The pace is unhurried. No one rushes the dragon. No one races the mountain. Instead, the rhythm of planting becomes a meditation, a slow dance of human and nature, of patience and purpose. And as the days pass, green shoots begin to rise from the watery fields like whispers. From this moment forward, the terraces will grow not just rice, but hope. Each seed is a prayer, each row a quiet defiance against hunger and haste. And so begins the cycle once again, not with noise or fire, but with hands in mud and hearts in the sky. The dragon is awake, the mountain breathes, and the future is planted one seed at a time. Scattered along the ridge lines and nestled in the crooks of the terraces are the heartbeats of the dragon's backbone. Villages like Pingon, Dazai, and Jinking. These are not just settlements. They are living museums of heritage where every home, path, and balcony clings to the mountain like a memory that refuses to fade. The houses are built of timber, resting on stilts to protect them from the rains and the steepness of the slope. Their rooftops, dark and slanted, mirror the lines of the terraces they overlook. From above, they seem like wooden lanterns floating on waves of green. Inside, life is simple, warm, and deeply communal. Generations share a home. Meals are cooked over wood fires. The smell of rice wine and bamboo smoke drifts into the mountain air. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each with their own language, customs, and stories. You'll recognize the Yao women instantly. Their long black hair, uncut since childhood, is coiled into elegant shapes atop their heads. Some let it fall like silk waterfalls when they bathe in the river, a scene so graceful it borders on myth. Despite modernization creeping up the mountain trails, traditions hold strong. Hand-woven clothes dyed in indigo, wooden looms creaking in quiet rooms, music played on reed pipes and bronze drums during village festivals. Weddings still involve ritual dances. The harvest is still welcomed with song. Hospitality is not a transaction here, it's a reflex. Guests are offered tea brewed from local leaves, rice wine in carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders who remember the mountain before electricity arrived. They speak of dragons in the mist, of ancestors who first carved the hills, of spirits who still guard the fields. And though tourism now brings visitors from every corner of the world, the rhythm of village life continues, largely undisturbed. The rice still grows. The rituals still mark the seasons. The terraces, like the people, endure not by resisting change, but by absorbing it slowly, carefully, like water descending one level at a time. Here, within the dragon's coils, life is not rushed. It flows, it echoes, it remembers. To walk the terraces of Longji is to walk through layers of myth. The hills are not just soil and stone. They're alive with stories whispered through bamboo groves and carried on the wind. For the villagers, these mountains are not merely land. They are sacred beings shaped by gods, guarded by spirits, and inhabited by tales passed from one generation to the next. The most enduring legend speaks of a sleeping dragon whose body stretches across the ridges. Its spine rises in coils, the very terraces themselves. Locals believe that the curves of the mountain are not man-made, but rather the dragon's scales, rising and falling with breath. When mist rolls in from the valley and covers the paddies in white, it's said the dragon stirs, breathing gently in its sleep. Another tale tells of how the terraces were born from divine generosity. In a time of famine, the ancestors climbed the mountains and prayed to the heavens. Moved by their devotion, the gods sent rain and instructed them to carve the hills into steps so rice could grow. The people obeyed, and the dragon appeared to guide their hands. Ever since, they have honored the mountain with respect, never shouting in the fields, never cutting trees without prayer. These beliefs are not written in books. They live in songs sung during the planting, in incense burned before a new growing season, in the silence kept during misty mornings. Children grow up hearing these tales not as fantasy, but as truth embedded in the land. To laugh at the dragon is to risk a bad harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to invite flood or drought. There are spirits in the water, too. Some farmers still make offerings before releasing the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a prayer murmured under breath. Not for show, just tradition as natural as tying a shoe. And whether you believe in dragons or not, something sacred hangs in the air. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the quiet certainty that this place is more than human work. It's a story still being told, written not in ink, but in stone, water, and rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by the mountains, remote, quiet, and known only to those who called it home. But no place, no matter how sacred, it remains untouched forever. The road came. The wires followed. Tourists, cameras, and smartphones climbed the hills alongside the farmers, and the terraces, ancient and weathered, faced a question they'd never had to answer before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was worry. Some feared the mountain will be sold piece by piece to developers. That concrete would replace wood. That culture would become a costume. But the people of Longji didn't just endure. They adapted not by abandoning the past, but by weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. Villagers began opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as family stays. Visitors eat local meals, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens picked that morning. They sleep in wooden stilt houses where roosters still announce the sunrise. The experience isn't curated for show. It's lived, honest, real, and farming. It continues. Each season, locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with sickles, worn smooth by time. Children attend school by day, but help in the fields at dusk. Tourism may bring income, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both are essential. Some young villagers have left for the cities, but many return. There is something magnetic about the terraces, something deeper than nostalgia. It's the sound of water sliding through the channels, the way the stars reflect in the paddies, the way the mountains teach patience. Local festivals have grown louder. Yes, there are now microphones where there were once drums. Signs in Mandarin and English stand beside sacred springs, but the rituals still happen. Offerings are still made. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it with grace, with balance. The terraces remain not because they are frozen in time, but because they breathe with time, flexing, adjusting, but never breaking. In an age where tradition is often sacrificed for progress, Longji stands as quiet proof that progress can walk gently if it chooses. That the old ways still have room in the modern world, especially when they are this beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never the same place twice. With each season, it sheds its skin, transforms its colors, shifts its mood. While cities change in years, the terraces change in weeks, draped not just in light, but in rhythm. To stand among them through a full year is to witness a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a mirror. The terraces are flooded in preparation for planting, and the still water reflects the sky like silver glass. Clouds drift not just above, but below your feet. Visitors speak of walking through heaven. The fields look empty, but they're full of potential. Beneath the surface, life is stirring. Summer brings a burst of green. The rice shoots stretch tall and straight, blanketing the hills in an emerald cascade. From a distance, the terraces look like ribbons of velvet, rolling in every direction. The air is warm and wet. Frogs call from the paddies. Farmers, knee-deep in water, work from dawn till dusk, their hats bobbing like tiny sails on a jade sea. Autumn is gold. Harvest time. The rice matures and the terraces catch fire in the sunlight, glowing with grain. The fields ripple in the wind and drums echo through the villages. Families gather. Songs are sung. Sticky rice is cooked. It's not just a season. It's a celebration. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty. Winter draws the mountain into stillness. The terrace is empty. The water drains. Snow sometimes falls, dusting the steps in soft white. Other times, frost clings to the walls like lace. There are no tools in the field, no voices, only silence. The dragon sleeps, resting, waiting. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn feeds, winter rests. The beauty of Longji isn't just in its shape, but in its cycle, in how it accepts time without resistance, in how it transforms quietly, never needing to announce itself. Photographers chase the light here, hoping to capture something eternal. But the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move, they breathe. They teach us softly that beauty is not static. It's a rhythm, a practice, a promise renewed with every season. And so the dragon turns again, not with roar or flame, but with water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. They are vow, quiet, and curved. And carved into the mountainside, a promise passed down from hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not just a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Longji could have moved to valleys, chased flatter ground. But they stayed. They studied the slope, listened to the stone, followed the water, and in doing so they made the impossible ordinary, feeding villages on a mountainside. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but about patience, about legacy, about care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony. No machine that can replicate the knowledge etched into each stone wall by calloused hands and quiet persistence. And yet nothing about them is frozen. The terraces are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, with the needs of the people, with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the modern world climbs the hills with its signals and screens, the terraces remain grounded. They change, but they do not vanish because their roots are not just in soil. They are in story, in ritual, in the simple, enduring act of planting a seed and trusting the sky. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract between humans and the earth, a contract signed with sweat and sun, renewed with every harvest. It's a reminder that progress does not always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs like a stream slipping over stone. And perhaps that is why the terraces speak to so many, from farmers to travelers to dreamers, because they represent what we've nearly forgotten. That the most lasting things in this world are not built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. Most visitors to Giza lift their eyes to the sky, drawn to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the gaze of the Great Sphinx. But few ask what lies beneath, under the sand, under the Nile, under centuries of forgotten currents. For in the quiet shallows near the ancient village of Abu Roash, just a short distance from the Giza Plateau, a strange tale stirs. It speaks of something enormous, eroded and ignored. An underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have whispered of it for generations. A smooth-backed shape that seems too symmetrical to be natural. A feline form, half buried in mud and waterlogged sediment. When the Nile's waters recede during droughts, parts of it emerge. Stone curves, grooves, and what some say is a carved pour. Impossibly worn but unmistakably shaped by hands. It doesn't sit among the tourist routes. There are no guideposts, no velvet ropes, no tour buses idling nearby. Just an area thick with reeds, brackish water, and silence. Explorers who venture there claim the land itself feels different, charged as if memory clings to it. Beneath the murk, sonar scans have picked up geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks placed with intent. But what truly startles are the claims that this figure, a sphinx-like formation submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely, not by decades, but by millennia. If true, it would shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline anchors the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE. But this underwater form, if genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green and the Nile ran wild through a wetter, lusher land. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it as a misidentified rock formation, limestone shaped by water and wishful thinking. But the grooves, the curves, the alignment with celestial markers, it all invites more questions than answers. The site remains unexcavated. Official archaeologists have largely ignored it. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's everything. A relic not just of Egypt past, but of a world lost to flood and time. For now, the so-called underwater Sphinx lies quiet, not sleeping, waiting. And if it could speak, one wonders what secrets it would tell and why so many seem determined not to listen. The legend of the underwater Sphinx moved from whispered folklore to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when a few independent researchers and divers began publishing strange reports, accounts of a massive lion-bodied figure partially submerged near the Giza Plateau. Early photographs were grainy, inconclusive, and often dismissed, but they sparked something that couldn't be put back in the bottle. Curiosity, and more dangerously, doubt. One of the most vocal early proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a weathered monument deep beneath silt and flood layers during a brief drought window. According to him, the figure wasn't an isolated rock or erosion trick. It had geometry, legs, symmetry, even the faint suggestion of a carved face. Naturally, this challenged the traditional narrative. Egyptology as a discipline rests on structure and established timelines. Most scholars place the construction of the Giza pyramids and the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. The suggestion of another Sphinx, older and partially submerged, will require rethinking not just Egyptian history, but the timeline of human civilization itself. Mainstream academics responded with caution, even disdain, without peer-reviewed excavation, carbon dating, or stratigraphic studies. The claim couldn't be taken seriously. Many argued the so-called underwater Sphinx was likely a natural formation, limestone weathered by thousands of years of, well, flooding and sediment erosion. In Egypt, they pointed out, nature often mimics the intentional. Wind, water, and time are capable sculptors, but the photos kept circulating. The sonar readings continued to show odd patterns, too regular, too smooth, too suggestive. And then came the theorists. Authors, filmmakers, and fringe historians began building stories around the mystery. That the Sphinx was a relic of a forgotten civilization, perhaps Atlantean, perhaps pre-dynastic Egyptian, lost in a flood that scoured the Sahara. They pointed to water erosion patterns on the original Great Sphinx, argued for lost technologies, and hinted that what lay beneath the Nile might be far older than accepted memory allows. The debate grew louder, but the ground remained still. No official dig was launched, no museum claimed it, and the Sphinx, if that's what it is, it remained right where it always had been, buried in silt, caught between myth and mud. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids isn't just provocative, it's revolutionary. If the underwater Sphinx is more than erosion or coincidence, then Egypt's story didn't begin in the 4th dynasty. It began before it, deep in prehistory, when the Sahara was a green savanna, and the Nile roamed wider, wilder, and less predictable. This possibility gained traction in the 1990s when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch studied the Great Sphinx itself. He argued that the deep vertical weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure wasn't caused by wind and sand, but by rainfall. Heavy sustained ancient rainfall which hadn't touched the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BCE. That pushed the possible date of the Sphinx back by thousands of years, well before the first pharaohs carved names into stone. If water shaped the original Sphinx, could water also have hidden an even older sibling? The so-called underwater Sphinx sits in a lower region near ancient floodplains. Some satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar suggest possible foundations, rectangular outlines, and deliberate shaping, all buried beneath silt and seasonal water. These signs hint that the site may not just be older than the Sphinx. It may come from a time when nothing in Egypt was yet carved in hieroglyphs. Supporters of the theory point to Egypt's missing chapters, the gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first dynasties. During this time, the Nile shifted courses, the Sahara transitioned from wet grasslands to dry desert, and civilizations may have risen and fallen, undocumented and erased. The idea that an ancient people, preliterate, pre-pharaonic, could have shaped a monument of this scale seems implausible to traditional historians. But is it? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was built around 9600 BCE by hunter-gatherers. It features megalithic pillars with carved animals, predating Stonehenge by thousands of years. Could Egypt hold a similar secret? An ancient culture that marked the land with stone long before papyrus carried their stories? If the underwater Sphinx was built in such a time, it would change everything we know about human history. It would suggest not just forgotten ruins, but a forgotten age, one that may have whispered to the builders of Giza, leaving behind more than myth. Perhaps a monument drowned, then forgotten. Stone doesn't lie. It remembers, and around the site of the so-called underwater Sphinx, it tells a quiet but persistent story, not just of time, but of water. Sediment layers, erosion marks, and flood patterns hint at a history long before the desert became dry, long before the Nile settled into its familiar course, long before the pharaohs carved their names into history. Geologists have examined photographs and data from the site near Abu Roash. Note peculiar erosion marks, smooth, rounded grooves that suggest prolonged exposure to flowing water. Not wind, not sand, but rainfall and movement, forces absent from this region for thousands of years. Similar arguments have been made about the Great Sphinx itself, especially its enclosure wall. Critics of the standard timeline point out that the deep vertical fissures seen on the Sphinx's surrounding trench don't resemble wind erosion at all. They mimic rainfall, heavy, sustained, prehistoric rain. Now, at the possible underwater Sphinx site, we see the same signature, only this time hidden beneath the shallow flood basin. During periods of low Nile flow or excavation, parts of the structure are said to rise into view, lion-like haunches, shoulders, and a foundation that seems too level to be natural. Researchers who have surveyed the area note that the basin is geologically active, with high clay content and evidence of ancient water tables fluctuating violently. The stone there is heavily worn, but not randomly. The wear follows the shape of the structure itself, flowing in lines that suggest deliberate carving, then drowning. Some sediment layers around the site date back to the early Holocene, when Egypt was wetter, greener, and prone to massive flooding if a monument had been carved then. It could have stood for centuries before being swallowed by mud, forgotten by shifting populations, and buried under the Nile's wandering silt. Skeptics argue this is all coincidence, natural formations teased into myth by hopeful eyes. But water doesn't form symmetry. It doesn't carve pores. It doesn't create aligned foundations or echo the geometry of a known Sphinx just a few miles away. So the question deepens. If water erased this monument from view, what else has it taken with it? And more urgently, how much of history still lies hidden beneath the surface? If the underwater Sphinx is truly there, silent, carved, and ancient, why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain beneath layers of mud and silence, passed over by archaeologists, ignored by governments, and left to the currents? The answer, like the artifact itself, lies beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological institutions are protective, rightfully so. The nation guards its ancient heritage with rigid protocols, strict excavation rules, and insistence on academic consensus. Digging up any site, especially one that challenges the traditional timeline, requires permits, funding, international oversight, and most importantly, institutional approval. And that approval often rests on one unspoken rule. Do not rewrite Egypt's history without a mountain of undeniable evidence. And that's the problem. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never received an official state-sponsored excavation. Independent researchers, foreign academics, and fringe theorists have studied the area, but without formal backing, their findings remain anecdotal, suggestive, but not conclusive. There's also the issue of the Nile itself. The river is not a static feature. It floods, recedes, and shifts over decades. The site where the monument allegedly rests is flood-prone, often submerged for much of the year. Excavation would require draining the area, rerouting water, protecting nearby ecosystems, and managing structural damage caused by centuries of sediment pressure. That alone would take years, if not decades. Then there are political factors. A discovery of this magnitude, if validated, would disrupt more than academic timelines. It could challenge established narratives, upset national pride, and attract a media frenzy Egypt might not be eager to welcome. The Ministry of Antiquities prefers to promote discoveries that reinforce Egypt's grandeur, not question its foundational history. Some whisper that certain institutions may already know more than they reveal, that preliminary studies have been done quietly behind closed doors. But without public records, peer-reviewed findings, or government announcements, these claims drift into conspiracy, and so the monument remains buried. Whether by accident or design, it sleeps under mud and skepticism. It is a strange irony that in a land obsessed with preserving its ancient past, one of its greatest mysteries may be hidden in plain sight, unclaimed, unstudied, and untouched by time's official record, but nothing stays buried forever. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was more than a sculpture. It was a symbol, part guardian, part god, part mystery. With a body of a lion and the head of a man, the Sphinx represented strength fused with wisdom, physical power tamed by the royal mind. It was a cosmic sentinel, placed at thresholds where the divine met the mortal. The most famous, of course, is the Great Sphinx of Giza, towering 66 feet high. It has guarded the plateau for over 4,000 years, facing the rising sun, watching over the tombs of pharaohs. Its exact origin is still debated. Some say it was built by Khafra. Others argue it may be far older, its face recarved over time. So what would it mean if a second Sphinx, hidden, water-worn, and possibly older, exists just miles away? It would change everything. No known records speak of twin sphinxes at Giza. Ancient texts are silent, but in later Greco-Roman tradition there are mentions of guardians positioned in balance, flanking sacred spaces. In Egyptian architecture, symmetry is sacred. Temples often have twin statues, twin obelisks, twin avenues of lions. Why not twin sphinxes? Some researchers argue that the so-called underwater sphinx might not be a copy, but the original, a prototype, a pre-dynastic version later replicated on a grander scale. If true, it suggests that the idea of the Sphinx came not from dynastic builders, but from a forgotten culture whose myths were carried forward, adopted, and refined. And if the monument predates writing, it may not be bound by the pharaoh's ideology at all. Its purpose could have been astronomical, ritualistic, or even commemorative, marking an event, a flood, or a forgotten god. The lion's shape itself is no accident. In ancient Egypt, lions represented the horizon, the gate of dawn and dusk. The Sphinx facing east watches the rebirth of the sun, eternally to carve one, was to freeze that sacred act in stone. Now imagine one carved before the pyramids, aligned, guarding, waiting. It would not just rewrite history, it would redefine the mythos of Egypt itself, not as the beginning of civilization, but as the last echo of something even older. And the fact that this symbol might be sleeping beneath water, all the more fitting for a guardian of lost worlds. As whispers of the underwater Sphinx echo further across the world, a quiet divide has opened, one that runs deeper than sediment or stone. On one side stands traditional Egyptology, cautious, structured, and rooted in academic consensus. On the other, a growing community of independent researchers, alternative historians, and curious minds who believe something extraordinary is being overlooked. Mainstream scholars insist on evidence, peer-reviewed studies, stratigraphy, inscriptions, and radiocarbon dates. Their concern is not unwarranted. Egypt is filled with natural rock formations that resemble human or animal shapes, and misidentifying them can lead to misinformation. Archaeology, after all, must be careful. The past is fragile. It cannot be rebuilt once broken by careless hands or media hype, but to others. Caution has become complacency. Independent investigators, many of them trained scientists or engineers from outside the field, argue that the underwater Sphinx and similar anomalies deserve deeper study. They point to high-resolution satellite images that show unnatural symmetry, to LiDAR scans that detect rectangular foundations beneath layers of mud, to erosion patterns that seem shaped not by chaos, but by design. They also question the political motivations behind silence. Tourism dollars flow through well-trodden monuments. A new Sphinx, especially one that threatens the accepted timeline, could disrupt Egypt's narrative and authority. The fear, they suggest, is not of fraud, but of rewriting everything. Books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences now regularly feature the underwater Sphinx. It has become a symbol of hidden history, used as both rallying cry and cautionary tale. Supporters call for open excavation. Detractors warn against pseudoscience. The truth, as always, is lost in the middle, buried beneath voices as thick as the Nile silt. The divide isn't just academic, it's emotional. It speaks to how we approach the past. Do we trust only what has been confirmed, or do we follow the hints left just beyond reach? The underwater Sphinx forces that question into the open. It's not just a rock or a relic, it's a litmus test for how curious we're allowed to be. And as long as it remains unearthed, both sides will continue to argue above a monument that says nothing yet might change everything. There's something haunting about a mystery buried in plain sight, especially when it wears the face of a lion and stares up from the mud with ancient silence. The so-called underwater Sphinx near Giza may or may not be real, but its pull is undeniable. It stirs something in us, a yearning not just to discover, but to remember. Because deep down, the story of a forgotten monument taps into something older than archaeology, the human sense of loss. We've always lived beside ruins. Cities fall, languages die. Civilizations vanish beneath waves, sand and ash. We look to the past not just for answers, but for identity. Who are we? How far back do our stories stretch? And what have we forgotten in our rush toward progress? If the underwater Sphinx is real, if it was carved by hands before recorded history, it becomes more than a relic. It becomes a voice from a chapter we didn't know existed. A marker from an age when people may have understood the stars differently, honored the earth more intimately, or carried a mythology we can only guess at. Some believe it belongs to an advanced prehistoric culture lost to global catastrophe, a theory often dismissed as fringe. But whether or not that's true, the emotional gravity remains. To imagine a monument carved long before the pyramids, submerged by rising waters and then erased, is to confront how fragile civilization truly is, and perhaps that's why the story persists. It reminds us that time is not linear, that empires are temporary, that even stone can disappear if the river flows long enough. But more importantly, it reminds us that discovery isn't over, that Earth still holds secrets not written in textbooks. In an era defined by instant answers and global data, the underwater Sphinx is a rare thing, an unanswered question. A possibility, a mystery not yet solved by drones or algorithms. And whether it proves to be natural rock or a forgotten monument, it already holds value because it makes us wonder. Wonder if the past is deeper than we thought. Wonder if myth holds memory. Wonder what lies just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. The underwater Sphinx of Giza, whether carved or accidental, confirmed or dismissed, remains where it has always been, beneath the surface, beneath the mud, the water, the weight of time. It has no plaque, no name, no spotlight, and yet it speaks softly in the absence of answers. For every monument we've unearthed in Egypt, there are others still buried, still waiting. Some are too fragile to uncover. Others are lost to the shifting Nile, drowned beneath layers of silt and secrecy. And a few like this one sit in plain view, ignored not because they lack importance, but because they ask questions we're not yet ready to answer. Maybe that's what makes the underwater Sphinx so powerful. Not its size, not its age, but its silence. It forces us to confront the limits of what we know and the discomfort of what we might have overlooked. In truth, it may never be excavated. Politics, funding, and tradition form walls taller than any tomb. But that doesn't mean it's irrelevant. Quite the opposite. The monument's very obscurity has turned it into a mirror, reflecting not just what lies buried, but what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. It also reminds us that history is not a closed book. It's a living puzzle, scattered across landscapes and shorelines, waiting for a shift in tide, a change in thinking, or a brave question to unsettle the dust. Perhaps one day the water will recede and the full form will rise, pause, face and all. Perhaps radar will confirm what myth has long suspected. Or perhaps the mystery will remain, passed from generation to generation, like a whisper between stones. But whether monument or mirage, the underwater Sphinx already serves its greatest purpose. It stirs the imagination, and in a world drowning in certainty, that may be its greatest gift. Because maybe the most ancient things aren't just buried in sand or time. Maybe they're buried in us in our need to explore, to remember, and to believe that somewhere out there, beneath waves or desert, the past still breathes and still waits to be found. You were born into the noble, soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths. No crowns, no land, no fancy titles. Just the family forge, anvil-shaped blisters, and the scent of roasted iron baked into your baby blanket. From the moment you can walk without tripping into the fire pit, you're expected to help. By age 6, you're officially your father's apprentice, which is a polite medieval way of saying tiny unpaid assistant with zero rights and permanent soot streaks on your face. Your toys, tongs, your playground. A dirt floor next to a furnace hot enough to cook your eyebrows. While other village kids are chasing chickens and skipping stones, you're learning how not to die next to molten metal. Fun games include guess how hot this is with your hand, hold a hammer until your arms fall off, and try not to cry when you mess up the nail again. Your father, the blacksmith, is a terrifying muscular man whose entire vocabulary consists of sighs, grunts, and the phrase hit it harder. He's got hands like tree bark and a permanent scowl etched from decades of smoke exposure and tax collectors. He teaches you everything. How to shape iron, how to fuel the fire, how to keep your mouth shut when a knife insults your work. You don't ask questions. You just observe, absorb, and obey. Mostly because asking questions results in a flying horseshoe and a week of silent treatment. Holidays. Nice idea. You don't get those. The forge doesn't take breaks, and neither do you. Someone always needs something sharpened, fixed, or reforged. You learn quickly that free time is just the time between one job and the next. And while you're technically learning a trade, what you're really learning is pain tolerance, heat resistance, and how to fall asleep standing up. By the time you're 10, you already smell like iron, swear like a miner, and have arms strong enough to carry water buckets that way more than your dog, assuming the dog didn't run away from the noise 2 years ago. This is your life now. Welcome to the family business. Hope you like sweat, smoke, and 70 years of back pain. If you thought you'd get a few good years of playtime before the hammer came down, think again. Childhood in the medieval blacksmith's world is more of a suggestion than a phase. The moment you can lift a bucket without toppling over, you're drafted. Forget games, toys, or any concept of fun. Your playroom is a smoke-stained shed filled with sharp objects and open flames. Your jungle gym, a rack of tongs next to a pit of glowing coal. One wrong step, and you're getting an unscheduled lesson in how long your skin can sizzle before Dad notices. Your official job title might be apprentice, but what it really means is do everything no one else wants to do and get yelled at anyway. You stoke the fire, pump the bellows, sweep the floor, clean the tools, wrist tack the coal, and try not to get impaled by a falling horseshoe all before breakfast. You get paid in food, stern nods, and the occasional grunt of mild approval, which in blacksmith language means you didn't completely ruin that today. Meanwhile, the village kids you once knew are out in the fields, maybe throwing sticks or learning how to milk goats. You envy them, even if they do smell like cheese and manure. They might grow up to be farmers or shepherds. Humble jobs, sure, but ones that involve fewer glowing weapons and surprise burns. You, on the other hand, are learning to make nails by hand. Nails. Thousands of them. Bent, twisted, and reheated again and again until they're straight enough to hold some lord's chicken coop together. If you're lucky, your father lets you swing a hammer on your own, right after he points out every single thing you're doing wrong. And don't even think about saying, "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't exist in the forge. Fatigue is weakness. Burnout is for candles. You keep swinging, keep sweating, keep smiling, or at least keep from crying where anyone can see. Because in the eyes of your master, who is also your dad, you're not a child anymore. You're a blacksmith in training, and the training never ends. The forge isn't just where you work. It's your entire existence. It dominates your senses, reshapes your muscles, and rewires your brain. By the time you're in your teens, it doesn't just feel like a place. It feels like a living creature, hot, smoky, temperamental beast that you must feed, control, and fear. You know the sounds by heart, the bellows wheezing, the iron hissing into water, the sharp clang of hammer on metal echoing like a war drum. There's a rhythm to it like some brutal medieval symphony, and your body moves in time with it, whether you're awake or half asleep. You stop noticing the heat after a while. That's not because it gets easier. It's because you've simply accepted it, like gravity or taxes. You know which stones get too hot to sit on, which coals burn quickest, and which parts of the floor are secretly trying to murder your feet. Your skin darkens from smoke, not sun. Your clothes, the same soot-stained tunic and leather apron you wear every day, smell like a mix of scorched wool, grease, and desperation. You don't own many things, but you do own this forge. Not on paper, mind you. Your father still technically runs it, but in practice it owns you. You start to forget what silence sounds like. The hiss, the clang, the crackle. It's constant. When the forge does go quiet, it's almost unsettling. You find yourself twitching like you're missing a beat in a song you've been forced to memorize since childhood. Your friends, assuming you've kept any, barely see you. He's probably at the forge becomes your default status. You're not a blacksmith. You are the forge, a two-legged extension of fire and steel. And strangely, a part of you starts to love it. Not the burns, not the blisters, but the feeling when the shape finally comes out right. When the horseshoe fits, when the blade gleams, when the metal bends to your will. For a moment, you're not just a kid covered in soot. You're a creator, a crafter, a necessary gear in the medieval machine. Then a moment passes, the next order arrives, and the fire roars again. Time to get back to work. By the time your friends are just starting to grow into their teenage limbs, yours already feel like they've been through a siege. While they're getting taller and stronger, you're getting stooped, scared, and stiff. Your arms are thick, but not in a heroic knight lifting a sword. More like a teenager who's been repeatedly attacked by anvils. Your back. Tragedy. Hunched from hauling metal and leaning over the forge for hours a day. Your knees. They creak when you crouch. Your shoulders pop every time you lift a hammer, which is every few seconds. So now that's just part of your personal soundtrack. And your hands. Let's talk about your hands. You used to have fingers. Now you have iron-tipped claws. They're blistered, cracked, and stained with soot so deep, even the Nile couldn't wash it off. Cuts are common. Burns are daily, and your fingernails. Half of them are permanently blackened or missing. When someone offers you bread, you hold it with the same delicacy you'd use to cradle a hedgehog made of glass, because every knuckle already feels like it's been cursed. There's no such thing as recovery time. Pull a muscle. Keep working. Twist your wrist. Use the other one. The forge doesn't care that your elbow is screaming. Iron doesn't wait politely while you rest. And let's not forget to sleep. You think with a day full of hammering and hauling, you'd pass out easily. But no, your muscles ache so bad you can't lie still. Your ears are still ringing from 10 hours of clanging, and your arms twitch with phantom swings like you're sparring ghosts in your dreams. You ache in places you didn't know could ache. You smell like pain. Even your pain has pain. And what does your father say about this? Good. You're learning. In a strange way, you are. You're not growing despite the pain. You're growing because of it. You're being hardened like the very metal you work, shaped by heat, pressure, and repetition. But make no mistake, by the time you hit adulthood, your body feels like it already lived 2 lives and died halfway through both. And the worst part? You're just getting started. In most jobs, smoke is a problem in your job. It's a coworker, and a particularly rude one. The forge isn't just hot, it's a choking chamber, and every breath you take comes seasoned with a fine aroma of coal dust, scorched metal, ash, and regret. If you can see clearly more than 6 feet ahead, congratulations. Someone forgot to light the fire. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that leaks more smoke and then it lets out. You try opening a window. There is no window. Just soot-black walls, your father's coughing, and the occasional gust of wind that blows everything into your eyes anyway. Your lungs. Let's just say they've entered a long-term toxic relationship with smoke. At first it burns, then it irritates. Then one day, it just becomes normal. Coughing fits. Part of the rhythm. Black mucus. Not ideal. But hey, at least it's consistent. You've reached the point where clean air feels suspicious. Even your voice changes. You start sounding like a 60-year-old goat farmer who drinks boiling tar. Words are scratchier, breaths are shorter, and your throat always feels like it's hosting a dust storm. But you keep working because you have to. And it's not just the smoke from the fire. There's metal dust from grinding, oil fumes from quenching, and sometimes burnt leather, charred wood, or whatever unfortunate material just dropped into the coals. You've probably inhaled 3 different types of poison before noon. Protective gear, please. A rag tied around your face is the best you can do, and even that gets sweaty, gross, and somehow smells worse than the smoke itself. You take it off, and suddenly it's a little harder to breathe, but at least you're not gagging on your own sweat. Long-term damage, of course. Asthma, black lung, early death, all part of the career package. But you're not thinking long-term. You're thinking about finishing that gate hinge before your father notices how crooked it is. In the world of a medieval blacksmith, air is just another burden. You don't breathe to survive. You breathe to keep hammering. By now, you've developed an intimate relationship with your tools, mostly based on pain, necessity, and mutual disrespect. Your hammer. It's basically an extension of your arm. You've named it. You've cursed it. You've swung it so many times that your shoulder now clicks when you raise it like a haunted maraca. But without it, you're just a sweaty guy standing in a smoke-filled hut. The hammer makes you a blacksmith and also makes you bleed regularly. Then there's your tongs, clumsy, hot, and always pinching you at the exact wrong moment. You've burned your fingertips more times than you've successfully picked up anything. The iron slips. The grip fails. You yell. Your dad tells you to grip it like you mean it. You consider throwing them into the fire just to teach them a lesson. Your chisel. It used to be sharp. Now it's mostly a suggestion of a blade because you've used it to shape, split, scrape, and occasionally pry open stuck doors. When your neighbor's lock breaks, files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets, your tool bench looks like a medieval torture rack. And honestly, it kind of is. You've been jabbed, crushed, pinched, sliced, and impaled by every item you own. Your fingers have memory now. They flinch at the mere sight of a new tool. Your apron. It's meant to protect you, and it sort of does it by protect. You mean catch hot metal shards and hold them close to your body like a smoldering hug. It's more scorched than stitched, and the leather stiffens like a corpse every winter. And yet, despite all this, you care for these tools like they're family. You sharpen them, oil them, line them up each night. Because if one breaks, you're done. You can't work. You can't earn. You can't eat. No tools, no income. So yes, your tools are your life. But don't be fooled. They've also declared war on your fingers, spine, and sanity. Every day they whisper, "We hope you survive, but we'll also slowly destroy you." And you say, "Yeah, that sounds about right. Now pass the hammer." You don't wear a crown, carry a sword, or lead armies. But without you, the village stops functioning by Tuesday. You're the blacksmith, and everyone needs you all the time for everything. You're the medieval equivalent of customer service, tech support, and roadside assistance rolled into one soot-covered figure who smells like smoke and shame. The knight needs a new sword. You make it. The farmer breaks a plow. You fix it. A monk's bell cracks. A baker's oven door jams. A shepherd's gate latch won't close. Guess who gets called? That's right, you every single time. And they all act like you've just been waiting for their problem. They show up unannounced, mid-swing, covered in mud and entitlement. "I know you're busy," they say, "but could you just the phrase that haunts you?" But here's the best part. You never get thanked. They assume it's your duty that you were born to serve. If their home works, their door closes, or their shield holds, they nod and walk away like you were the lucky one. As if you should be honored to repair their rusty bucket at sunset for half a loaf of stale bread. Payment. Often inconsistent. Sometimes in coins, sometimes in goods, sometimes in promises they forget by the next market day. One man paid you with a dead chicken good for soup. It wasn't. You're also the go-to fixer for problems that don't belong to you. Bent hinges from someone sitting on a gate. You fix it. Broken dagger from a drunk fight. You fix it. A mysterious piece of iron no one can identify, but absolutely must be fixed. Yep, still you. Yet when the village praises anyone, it's the knight, the priest, or the miller with the extra fat goat. Your background noise. A necessity. A reliable tool, not a person. But here's the secret. You know they couldn't last a week without your work. Their fields would stall, their homes would fall apart, their horses would limp. And while they may not sing songs about you, their entire world is quietly held together by your hands. You think peace would be good news. No raiders, no bandits, no screaming noblemen demanding a new sword by sundown. But for you, peace is terrible for business. Because you, the blacksmith, may work on plows and hinges, but what really pays the bills is war. When there's fighting, everyone needs you. Weapons, armor, arrowheads by the hundreds. Even horseshoes were down faster under the weight of panicked cavalry charges. You're flooded with work. The forge burns brighter. The coins roll in. You may be exhausted, but your belly is full. And your debt to the alehouse, momentarily forgotten. But then the war ends. The local lord declares a truce. The knights stop marching, and suddenly your orders vanish. No more swords, no more helmets. Just a farmer asking if you can sharpen a sickle and maybe accept 3 onions as payment. And sure, you can make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, and cooking spits. But there's not much profit in it. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard. But they want to pay you like a stable boy. You become a negotiator, a beggar, and a merchant all at once, haggling for decent wages like your forge is a stall at market. And don't even think about raising your prices. People look at you like you just cursed their cow. But you're just hammering metal, they say, as if molten iron bends itself into shape while singing church hymns. You start to miss the chaos. Not the blood, not the burning villages, but the steady flow of orders, the purpose, the rush. When knights lined up outside your forge with dented shields and coin purses ready, you mattered. Now you're making keys for locked doors no one locks, patching pots that should have been thrown out, and fixing tools so old they belong in a museum, not a field. Peace for everyone else means safety and rest. For you, it means economic anxiety and hunger. And deep down, though you never say it out loud, part of you whispers wouldn't mind a small skirmish. Just a little one. Maybe a minor border dispute. Because when swords break, some jobs have an end, a clear finish line, a task completed, followed by rest, applause, or at least a warm bowl of stew. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. Your work is never done. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your dreams. You fix one thing and 3 more breaks. Patch a gate hinge. The wheel falls off the cart. Finish a batch of nails. Someone shows up demanding 10 more, but longer this time. And also, I can't pay you until harvest. You rise before the sun and go to sleep long after it disappears behind the trees. And even then, your brain keeps hammering. You dream of bellows sparks, and that one customer who still owes you a half-dozen eggs and a thank you. Even the quick jobs never are. A villager walks in holding a mangled rake. It just needs a little fixing, they say. But that's 2 hours of reshaping, reheating, hammering, and nodding politely as they ask, "Is it ready yet?" Every 5 minutes. And just when you think you can finally sit, maybe drink something that isn't lukewarm and smoky, your apprentice comes running. The farrier's ill. You need to shoe the horse. Of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. And around here, blacksmith means everyone else's last resort. The forge demands attention constantly. The fire won't stoke itself. The tools rust if ignored. Your anvil shifts in the summer heat. Your bellows crack in the winter cold. Everything is either falling apart or threatening to. Even holidays don't stop the work. Sunday is technically a day of rest. Unless, of course, someone's ox cart breaks on the way to market. Then suddenly you're in your apron, half awake, praying the priest doesn't walk by while you're hammering on the Lord's day. You don't keep a to-do list. That implies there's a point when it'll all be crossed off. There isn't, because blacksmithing isn't a job. It's a cycle. Work, fix, repeat until your body gives out or your hammer does. And the worst part, you kind of love it. You think that pounding hot iron all day would earn you at least two things: a good meal and a solid night's sleep. Wrong. In the life of a medieval blacksmith, food and rest aren't guaranteed. They're luxuries, like clean water or polite customers. Let's talk about food first. You work from sunup to sundown, burning calories like a runaway horse. And what do you get? A piece of coarse bread, a bowl of cold pottage that might contain yesterday's turnip, and maybe a bit of salted pork if it's a special day, which it isn't. You eat standing up, one hand still clutching tongs, the other shielding your food from the forge's ash. Meals are rushed. Conversations are grunts. And if someone knocks on the door mid-bite because their latch is stuck, guess what? That stew's going cold. You don't eat to enjoy yourself. You eat to survive. Fuel in, hammer out. Now let's talk about sleep, or the cruel parody of it. When you finally crawl into bed, your hands are throbbing, your back feels like it lost a bar fight, and your ears are still ringing from a full day of iron symphonies. Your bed. A straw-stuffed sack that's either too lumpy, too flat, or full of mysterious crawling things. Your blanket. A scorched wool sheet that smells faintly of forged smoke, old ale, and regret. And just as your eyes are closing, your brain remembers that order you forgot to finish, or that hinge that cracked weird, or the payment you still haven't received for that wagon wool 3 weeks ago. Sleep becomes a negotiation. You lie awake, tossing, turning, calculating how long you can delay repairs without someone banging on your door at dawn. And don't forget the midnight surprises. Someone's horse throws a shoe, a storm rips a door off its hinges, or a noble's sword urgently needs sharpening before a hunt. Because obviously you don't need rest. You learn to survive on scraps and snatches, stolen bites, half naps, and sheer stubbornness. Because in your world, productivity comes before nourishment, deadlines before dozing. Food and sleep aren't breaks from the job. They're intermissions between hammer swings. You'll eat when you can, sleep when you're allowed, and hope the fire doesn't go out while you're dreaming. There was a time when your hands were soft once, long ago, maybe as a child. Now they're ruined. Your fingers have become tools themselves. Stiff, swollen, cracked, and calloused to the point where they barely feel anything except when it hurts. You can't hold a quill. You can barely lace your own boots, but you can grab red-hot tongs with the casual confidence of someone who's been burned so often. Pain has lost its meaning. Every joint in your hands pops when you move. Your knuckles look like they've been mugged by a hammer. Your palms are a map of blisters. Old new, layered like tree rings. Need to figure out what season it is. Just check the blister count. More than 5. It's summer. You've lost fingernails more than once. Some came off clean, others didn't. You once crushed your thumb so badly it turned black for 2 weeks. You didn't stop working. You just switched hands and grunted more than usual. Cuts are constant. Sometimes it's a chipped edge. Sometimes a file bites you. Sometimes the iron fights back. Every week something leaks blood. You wrap it in a scrap of cloth, curse under your breath, and keep working. Worse still are the burns. Some are mild, little reminders that iron doesn't forgive. Others are worse, the kind that sizzle, bubble, and leave scars that tell their own stories. You branded yourself more times than a cattle farmer, and at this point you're not even mad about it. You're just used to it. Your grip strength is the only thing that's improved. You can crush walnuts like they owe you money. But dexterity? That's gone. You drop things. Your fingers shake when cold. You're 30 and have the hands of a 70-year-old knight who lost 3 wars and now plays tavern dice for soup. But despite it all, these hands are what keep you alive. They shape swords, fix hinges, and hold a hammer that holds your reputation. They hurt constantly, but they work because in this life, it doesn't matter how broken your body is, as long as you can still swing. Let's be honest, you don't smell great. Actually, you haven't smelled clean since you were 5 the moment you became your father's apprentice. Your personal fragrance took a permanent turn toward unwashed ashtray, mixed with burnt bacon and desperation. Welcome to blacksmith life, where no matter how hard you scrub, you smell like fire forever. The forge burns all day, and so do you. The smoke seeps into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Your sweat doesn't even smell like regular sweat anymore. It's more like smoked meat. Left out during a warm spring, you could bathe in theory. But baths are rare. Water is cold, and you're working 6 days a week, covered in soot, grease, and coal dust before the sun's even fully up. So what's the point? You'll be filthy again by breakfast. Your clothes are no help. You wear the same singed tunic and scorched leather apron every day. They haven't been truly clean since the last festival, and even then, someone spilled ale on them before noon. Now they just sort of hang on your body like a protective layer of hardened funk. You try perfume? Forget it. It lasts 10 minutes before the forge eats it alive. Flowers wilt near you. Bread goes stale faster. Cats hiss when you pass. And the worst part, people notice. You walk into the tavern and the crowd parts like the Red Sea. The innkeeper already knows to seat you in the corner. Near a window if possible. Not out of courtesy, but survival. No one wants to share a bench with a human embodiment of a burnt fence post. Still, you take it in stride. A little shame is better than going unnoticed. You're known. People say that's the blacksmith with a mix of respect and nasal discomfort. You may not be the most charming man in town, but you're definitely the most aromatic besides. Smelling like fire means you've been working. Smelling like iron means you've been crafting, and smelling like sweat-soaked leather dipped in soot and regret. Well, that just means you're a professional. You didn't choose this life. The forge chose you through your father's calloused hands and the iron expectations passed down like a rusty heirloom. And now you're doing the same. Your son doesn't play with wooden swords or run wild through the fields. He fetches coal, pumps the bellows, holds the tongs steady while sparks rain down. And you mutter, "Don't flinch." He's maybe 7, but already smells like burnt metal and wet burlap. You feel a bit guilty, but only a bit because you're not being cruel. You're preparing him. This is the trade. This is survival. He watches you swing the hammer, and you see the way he stares wide-eyed, half in awe, half in fear. You remember that look. It's the same one you used to give your father back when he seemed like a mountain. Now you understand he wasn't made of stone, just exhaustion and responsibility. You teach the boy everything. How to gauge heat by color. How to tap, not slam. How to listen to metal. You shout sometimes more out of habit than anger. Hold it right. That's too cold. Don't cry. It's only a burn. You try to soften things when you can. A story by the fire. A piece of dried fruit when you can afford it. But tenderness doesn't last long in the forge. There's too much work to do. His hands will soon look like yours. His back will ache before his voice cracks. He'll learn to sleep through ringing ears and wake up before sunrise without being told. He'll outgrow his shirt, but not the burn marks. And when you finally fall apart, knees, shoulders, or lungs, he'll carry the hammer you can no longer lift. People might say it's unfair that the cycle should end, but this is how it's always been. A lineage of soot, steel, and survival. You're not just passing down a trade, you're passing down a legacy, a forge that never cools. So yes, you raise your son to do it all again. Not because you're cruel, but because someone has to keep the fire going. You spent a lifetime standing too close to fire, swinging too much iron, and breathing too little clean air. It was never a question of if your body would fail. Just when. And now it's happening. Your knees creak like wooden doors in a storm. Your back refuses to straighten your fingers once strong enough to bend steel. Now tremble when you lift a cup. The forge still roars, but your arms won't answer. The hammer feels heavier every day, as if it knows it's nearly time to leave your grip. You don't go out in a blaze of glory. There's no heroic finale, no ballad. You simply slow down. You start handing tusks to your son. You sit more, watch more. He asks you questions, and for the first time you struggle to remember the answers. The villagers start going to him now. They still nod respectfully when they pass you, but they talk to your boy. He's the one with the calloused hands now. The burns are fresh on him. The ache of the craft has shifted to new shoulders, and quietly, you're proud. You were never wealthy. You never owned land or books or fine clothes, but you were necessary. You kept swords sharp, wheels turning, gates swinging, and farms working. The world didn't thank you often, but it moved because of you. You likely won't see 50. Most blacksmiths don't. The damage piles up, lungs blackened from years of smoke, joints ground down like iron on stone, heart worn out from constant heat and effort. But when you're gone, your work stays. Nails in church doors, blades at noble hips, horses shod and ready to ride. You leave behind no titles, just tools, scars, and a son with a hammer. And that, in your world, is enough. They may bury you in a simple grave. No gold, no statue, just a name carved in wood and a forge that still burns in your memory. But every clang that echoes through the village long after you're gone, that's the sound of you, still working. You were never a knight. You didn't ride into battle with banners flying or wear polished armor that caught the sunlight. But you made that armor. You didn't farm the land, but you made the plows that carved it. You didn't bake the bread, but you forged the oven doors. You didn't build a castle, but every nail in its beams, every hinge on its gates, were touched by your fire. You were a blacksmith, and in the medieval world that meant everything. While nobles argued and kings changed crowns, you stood by your forge, day in, day out, shaping the world piece by piece. 1,000 small things. Rivets, hooks, braces, buckles. Nothing that draws a crowd. Everything that holds the world together. Your life was loud, but your legacy is quiet. No one wrote songs about your hammer. No bard praised your tongs. But every working wheel, every unbroken sword, every barn door that swings instead of falling, that was you. People walked past your forge and saw smoke. They smelled sweat and soot and assumed that was all. But inside was a symphony of heat and steel, a creation in endurance. You didn't just forge iron, you forged civilization. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And now, long after your hands have gone still, the fire continues. Your son lifts your hammer. Your grandson learns the heat. Your name might fade from memory, but the tools you built carry on, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. You were never crowned, never honored, never celebrated. But without you, nothing moved. No carts rolled, no armies marched, no homes were secured. You were the foundation beneath the history books, the ember glowing beneath the stories of kings. And that matters more than anyone ever said aloud. Because in a world made of wood, stone, and willpower, you were the fire, the silent spark that turned raw or into progress. You weren't just part of the world, you kept it turning. Long before alchemy was associated with secretive European laboratories and robbed mystics whispering over bubbling flasks, it was something far more sacred, and far more ancient. Its true origin lies not in medieval Europe, but in the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt, where transformation wasn't a trick of science, but a divine principle etched into every corner of life and death. The ancient Egyptians had a word for it, chemia, derived from chem, meaning black land. It referred to the dark, fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile. But this wasn't just a poetic nickname for their geography. It held deep spiritual meaning. To the Egyptians, black was the color of potential, of richness, a raw matter waiting to be transformed. And so the land of Egypt itself became a metaphor for the transformative power of nature. This is where the word alchemy, alchemia, would eventually be born. But alchemy in Egypt wasn't just about turning base metals into gold. That obsession came later. For the ancient Egyptians, alchemy was everywhere. It was in the ritual of mummification, where the body of the dead was carefully preserved, transfigured, and prepared for eternity. It was in the temples, where priests blended oils, herbs, and minerals into sacred elixirs. It was in the stars, in the soil, in the very act of cooking bread and brewing beer. Transformation, they believed. It was the language of the gods. In fact, Egyptian alchemy was never purely physical. It was spiritual at its core. To change something outwardly, you first had to understand it inwardly. This idea would echo through the centuries in alchemical texts from all cultures. Some legends say that these early Egyptian alchemists were guided by a divine figure, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and the moon, according to lore. Both revealed the secrets of creation, transformation, and the soul's journey beyond death. These secrets, it was said, were written on a mystical object known as the Emerald Tablet. But before we get to that, we have to recognize one truth. Alchemy began not as a quest for gold, but as a sacred science of life. In Egypt, it was the fire that gave rise to all others, and everything that came after, from Persia to Paris, would trace its roots back to this ancient fertile land. If ancient Egypt was the birthplace of alchemy, then Thoth was its divine midwife. In Egyptian mythology, Thoth wasn't just a god. He was the god of knowledge, magic, writing, time, and the very laws of the universe. With the head of an ibis and a moon disk above him, Thoth stood for equilibrium and in a world obsessed with order and transformation. He was the sacred scribe of all hidden truths. According to myth, Thoth didn't just teach alchemy, he embodied it. The Egyptians believed he had authored thousands of books filled with divine wisdom. Most of these were never meant for mortal eyes, but one fragment of his knowledge would change history, the mysterious Emerald Tablet. Whispers of the Emerald Tablet have echoed through time like a riddle carved into the bones of civilization. Said to be inscribed in green crystal or emerald stone, the tablet was a short, poetic text, barely a dozen lines long. Yet those lines were believed to hold the ultimate key to transforming matter, spirit, and reality itself. It begins with a sentence that has haunted thinkers for centuries. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This simple line, the principle of correspondence, suggests that the microcosm and the macrocosm are mirrors. What happens in the heavens happens within the human soul. What changes in the lab echoes in the cosmos. The Emerald Tablet didn't hand out instructions for making gold. It handed out a worldview. It said the world is not fixed. Everything can be refined, elevated, transmuted, not just lead into gold, but ignorance into wisdom, chaos into harmony, the mortal into the divine. The tablet also speaks of the one thing, the source of all creation, and how it rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying the power of all things in its wake. Many saw this one thing as the philosopher's stone, others as the soul, the ether, or even consciousness itself. But perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't the content of the tablet, but who could understand it. You had to be more than a scholar. You had to be a seeker. And it was this sacred riddle gifted by Thoth that would survive the fall of Egypt and pass like a torch across borders and ages, first to Persia, then to the world. As Egypt's golden age faded, alchemy did not vanish. It migrated, traveling along trade routes carried by scribes, mystics, and conquerors. It passed into the hands of another ancient empire, Persia. But this was not merely a transfer of knowledge. In Persia, alchemy underwent a transformation of its own, one that blended spiritual fire with philosophical depth. The backbone of Persian alchemical thought was deeply shaped by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. At its heart was the concept of duality, a constant battle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, purity and corruption. Fire, the purest of all elements in Zoroastrian belief, wasn't just a symbol, it was sacred. It burned in temples, representing divine wisdom, and that fire would light the crucibles of early Persian alchemists. But while spiritual ideas burned bright, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first real voice, one that still echoes today. Living in Roman Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His writings fused technical descriptions of furnaces, stills, and elixirs with strange visionary journeys in his most famous dream. He sees himself dismembered, burned, and transformed in an alchemical furnace. But rather than horror, this vision is divine. It's the symbolic death of the self, the purification of the soul. Zosimos didn't think alchemy was just about changing metals. He believed the alchemists must themselves be transformed. Just as base matter must be broken down before becoming gold, the alchemist had to suffer, purify, and transcend. In his words, alchemy was a mystery of spirit and matter alike. He introduced the idea of spiritual alchemy, a concept far ahead of his time. Zosimos's writings are full of strange symbols: lions devouring serpents, men melting into colored vapors, divine beings emerging from fire. These weren't chemical notes. They were metaphors for the soul's journey toward perfection. Zosimos was also one of the first to stress that true knowledge couldn't be bought or memorized. It had to be earned. The path of the alchemist was a path of discipline, suffering, and revelation. His influence would ripple across centuries and continents, and though many of his texts were lost or misunderstood, one thing was clear: alchemy was no longer just a proto-science. It has become a sacred philosophy. As the embers of ancient knowledge flickered across the remnants of Egypt, Greece, and Persia, a new empire rose, and with it a golden age of wisdom. Under the banner of Islam, from the 8th to the 13th century, a vast intellectual renaissance began. While Europe descended into the Dark Ages, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became sanctuaries for philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and alchemy. At the heart of this revival stood a man whose name would become legend: Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber. More than a chemist, more than a philosopher, Jabir was a fusion of both. Often called the father of chemistry, his contributions to alchemy were so profound that they laid the foundation for modern science itself. Working in the courts of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th century, Jabir approached alchemy not as mysticism, but as a structured, testable discipline. He introduced laboratory methods still recognizable today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation. He invented new instruments, refined acids, and wrote over 100 texts blending philosophy with chemical experimentation. But he didn't abandon the spiritual roots of the craft. Far from it. Jabir believed that everything in the universe was composed of combinations of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and infused with spiritual qualities. His system added a complex blend of numerology, astrology, and symbolism in his view. Every transformation in the material world mirrored a deeper transformation in the soul. Jabir also introduced the idea of balance, or mizan, as the key to alchemy. Just as the body must be balanced to remain healthy, so must metals be balanced to attain perfection. Gold was not simply a metal, it was matter in perfect equilibrium, and if balance could be achieved through careful processes, then even the basest metal could be elevated. His influence didn't stay within Islamic borders. Over time, Jabir's texts were translated into Latin and circulated throughout medieval Europe, igniting a wave of Western alchemists who would build upon his teachings, often without even realizing they were standing on the shoulders of a Persian genius. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy took its most decisive step forward. It was no longer just sacred symbolism. It was a method, a system, a science. And yet it remained what it had always been: a map to transformation, both material and divine. As the Islamic world preserved and expanded the knowledge of the ancients, Europe remained cloaked in superstition and spiritual rigidity. But knowledge has a way of traveling, especially when it's too powerful to be contained. Slowly, piece by piece, alchemy made its way westward. Smuggled through language, ink, and conquest, the bridge between East and West was built in places like Alexandria, once home to the Great Library, and later Toledo and Cordoba in Islamic Spain, or Al-Andalus. Here, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked side by side in rare moments of intellectual harmony. Translators toiled over Arabic manuscripts, decoding the works of Jabir, Zosimos, and Aristotle, breathing forgotten ideas back into Europe. By the 12th century, Europe was starving for knowledge. The rediscovery of these ancient texts, especially on alchemy, was nothing short of a cultural detonation. But what arrived wasn't the practical science of chemistry alone. It was alchemy in its fullest form, a fusion of spirit, matter, and meaning. Monasteries began hiding strange manuscripts behind sacred scripture. Monks experimented with metals not just to purify them, but to purify themselves. And in hidden chambers and candlelit studies, European minds began to obsess over one idea: transmutation, the notion that base metals could become gold and that the human soul could do the same. One of the most influential texts to reach Europe was the Tuba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious dialogue among ancient sages discussing the secrets of nature. Then came the Picatrix, a massive Arabic grimoire filled with astrological and alchemical symbolism. These works didn't just pass on recipes. They carried worldviews, and those worldviews planted seeds in curious minds. The Latin translations of these texts circulated quietly, often disguised as religious or philosophical treatises to avoid accusations of heresy. After all, alchemy posed a threat. It challenged the fixed order of things. If lead could become gold, could a peasant become noble? Could man become divine? The church watched with suspicion, but alchemy's allure was too strong. It offered a hidden path to perfection, outside of dogma, outside of authority. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had taken the torch. The flame that once burned in Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad now flickered in castles, monasteries, and secret societies. Alchemy had crossed the threshold, and it was about to evolve again. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy in Europe had transformed into something almost mythic. It was no longer just an intellectual pursuit. It was a holy quest, and at the heart of that quest lay one object, one idea, one obsession, the Philosopher's Stone. The stone wasn't just a chemical substance. It was a mystery wrapped in allegory, hidden in symbols and cloaked in riddles, said to have the power to transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality through the elusive elixir of life. The Philosopher's Stone became the most sought-after artifact in Western esoteric tradition. But to those who truly understood alchemy, the stone was not physical. It was spiritual. In alchemical manuscripts, it went by many names. Lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some claimed it was a literal red crystalline substance. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual awakening. But all agreed it was the key to ultimate transformation. Alchemists believed the universe itself was a living organism, constantly striving toward perfection. Metals, too, were alive, growing slowly in the womb of the earth. Lead was simply immature gold, and just as nature evolved toward balance, man could evolve as well. The Philosopher's Stone was the accelerant of that evolution. European alchemists like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later Paracelsus devoted their lives to understanding the processes of nature in pursuit of this ultimate truth. They built furnaces, studied astrology, collected rare minerals, and wrote cryptic texts filled with serpents, suns, dragons, and kings, all metaphors for the stages of inner and outer transformation. The stone's creation was said to follow a path called the magnum opus, or great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening, symbolic of death, decay, and the breaking down of ego. Then came albedo, the whitening, purification. Then citrinitas, the yellowing, illumination. And finally rubido, the reddening, rebirth, and the emergence of the stone. But why hide this process in metaphor? Because true transformation, alchemists believed, wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The stone would reveal itself only to those who were ready, not just intellectually, but spiritually. To seek the stone was to seek perfection. And while many searched for gold, the wisest alchemists knew the only thing worth perfecting was the soul. As alchemy took deeper root in medieval Europe, it began to slip into the shadows. What was once open dialogue in temples and scholarly exchanges in courts now became hidden practice. The reasons were many: religious scrutiny, political fear, and the simple fact that alchemy's language had become a secret code, decipherable only to the initiated. The church, wielding enormous power, saw in alchemy both promise and danger, while some Christian mystics embraced it. Seeing the transmutation of metals as a mirror of Christ's resurrection, others condemned it. The idea that man could manipulate nature, even achieve spiritual ascension outside of divine grace, was heretical. To avoid persecution, alchemists cloaked their teachings in allegory and symbolism. Thus began an era where alchemy went underground, hiding in secret societies, coded manuscripts, and obscure symbols that only insiders could interpret. The Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claimed to hold ancient alchemical wisdom passed down from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos spoke of spiritual enlightenment, divine harmony, and the hidden sciences. Though no one could prove their existence, their ideas spread like wildfire, inspiring generations of seekers. Then there were the Freemasons, whose roots trace back to stone builders, but whose rituals echoed deeply with alchemical philosophy. Purification, transformation, inner light. Whether or not they practiced alchemy in the literal sense, their symbolic language aligned perfectly with its aims, the building of the perfect self. Alchemy also found refuge in books of secrets, texts like the Mutus Liber, which contain no words, only a series of strange symbolic images meant to communicate the great work without uttering a single sentence. Other manuscripts were written in green language, a form of wordplay, puns, and poetic double meanings that concealed their deeper truth. The alchemist's life had become one of duality, outwardly a scholar, physician, or monk, quiet, obedient, inwardly a revolutionary, chasing the divine through fire and metal. Spirit and stone, the very secrecy that threatened alchemy also preserved it. Like a fire buried beneath ash, it smoldered unseen, passed down from master to apprentice, generation to generation. And in these quiet shadows, alchemy continued to evolve, not just as an early science, but as a living philosophy, one that would soon encounter its greatest challenge, the birth of modern chemistry by the 17th and 18th centuries. A quiet revolution was brewing, one that would both inherit and bury the legacy of alchemy. The Age of Enlightenment had arrived. The mysticism and metaphor that once cloaked alchemical thought were no longer welcomed in scholarly halls. In their place came a new language, empiricism, logic, and repeatable results. Alchemy's successor had arrived. Its name was chemistry. This wasn't an abrupt execution. It was a slow, methodical transformation. Many of the earliest chemists were in fact alchemists. They simply shifted focus. The goal was no longer spiritual perfection or the transmutation of souls, but measurable change. No more dragons and black suns, just beakers, balances, and precise documentation. One of the final nails in the coffin came with Robert Boyle, often called the father of modern chemistry, in his 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist. Boyle argued that matter was made up of atoms and that chemical reactions could be explained without mystical forces. He didn't mock alchemy, but he stripped it of its esoteric language. Boyle believed in the alchemist's power to transform, but insisted it must be explained through natural laws, not allegory. Soon after, Antoine Lavoisier would discover the role of oxygen in combustion and disprove the ancient theory of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The periodic table would follow. Laboratories became secular temples of knowledge. Alchemy, with its hidden codes and sacred metaphors, was seen as outdated, an embarrassment to real science. But here's the paradox. Chemistry owed its very existence to alchemy. The tools, the techniques, the curiosity. It all came from the furnace of that ancient craft. Alchemy had walked so that chemistry could run still. The world was changing. Industrialization demanded results, not riddles. Governments funded laboratories, not lodges. The philosopher's stone was replaced by the microscope, the alembic by the Bunsen burner. What was once sacred had become material. Yet not all was lost. In hidden corners and quiet minds, alchemy still breathed, not as a science, but as a symbol of transformation, of unity, of the eternal dance between matter and spirit. And while the world turned to chemistry for answers, some still look to alchemy for meaning. Because some fires never go out, they just burn beneath the surface. Alchemy may have vanished from the halls of science, but it never truly died. Instead, it transformed, just as it always taught that all things must. What began in the tombs of Egypt, refined in the fire temples of Persia, and encoded in the hidden texts of medieval Europe, didn't simply disappear. It evolved, splintering into chemistry, psychology, medicine, and even modern spirituality. Its outward form was shed, but its inner message endured. In the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist emerged, not with a furnace, but with a notebook and a mind full of dreams. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, rediscovered the hidden wisdom of alchemy and gave it new life. He argued that the ancient alchemists weren't just transforming metals, they were unconsciously mapping the human psyche. Negrito was depressed. The whitening albedo was insightful. The reddening rubedo was the birth of a unified self. The philosopher's stone, Jung said, it was individuation, the process of becoming whole. Alchemy, it turned out, had always been about more than gold. Today we see its fingerprints everywhere, in self-help books preaching transformation, in stories of heroes who descend into darkness to return reborn. In the very language we use, words like refine, distill, purify, all echoes of the alchemist's path. Even in science, the spirit of alchemy lingers. Chemists still transmute elements in nuclear reactors. Physicists speak of dark matter and unified fields, with the same wonder alchemists once had for ether and quintessence. The search for the fundamental building blocks of the universe continues. Only the language has changed. But perhaps the true legacy of alchemy lies in its insistence on wholeness. It never separated spirit from matter or science from mystery. It taught that the transformation of the world begins with the transformation of the self, that behind every experiment was a sacred question. Who are you becoming in the process? In a world driven by speed, by technology, by the cold precision of data, alchemy whispers an ancient truth that to change anything truly, you must also be willing to change yourself. And so the alchemist's fire still burns, not in crucibles, but in hearts, waiting, calling, transforming. Because alchemy was never just a science, it was a mirror. At first glance, Cappadocia seems like a surreal painting, its surface dotted with towering stone chimneys and rippling ridges carved by wind and time. Tourists marvel at the strange beauty above, but what most never realize is that the real wonder lies beneath their feet. Deep under this Turkish landscape is a forgotten world, a labyrinth of subterranean cities stretching for miles. These aren't simple caves or makeshift shelters. They're entire urban complexes hidden underground, complete with residences, chapels, wells, food storage, stables, and even schools. Some go down as far as 18 stories, housing thousands of people in the shadows of the earth. The most astonishing part? Many of these cities were completely unknown until the mid-20th century. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinkuyu knocked down a wall in his basement. What he found behind it wasn't brick or dirt. It was a tunnel. That tunnel led to another, then to a chamber, then to a spiral staircase. He had accidentally uncovered an ancient entrance to one of the largest underground cities in the world. It was as if an entire civilization had chosen to vanish beneath the ground, leaving behind no sign except silence. But Derinkuyu was just one of many. Over the decades, archaeologists have identified hundreds of underground settlements throughout Cappadocia, at least 40 major ones interconnected through narrow corridors and secret escape routes. These weren't random burrows. They were deliberately planned and engineered. Massive stone doors could seal off passageways from the inside. Ventilation shafts brought fresh air from the surface. Wells tapped into underground aquifers, ensuring fresh water even under siege. Why would anyone build something so elaborate under the earth? That question has haunted historians for years. Theories abound. Were these cities hiding spots from invading armies, monastic refuges, secret spiritual sanctuaries? Or were they something far older, far stranger? Whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Cappadocia wasn't just a region. It was a refuge, a world beneath a world, a place where thousands could disappear from the surface and live their lives entirely underground. And the deeper you go into these cities, the stranger the story becomes to understand why people built cities beneath Cappadocia. We first need to understand the land itself, because Cappadocia is no ordinary terrain. Millions of years ago, a series of violent volcanic eruptions buried central Turkey under layers of ash. That ash hardened into a soft, porous rock known as tuff, a material light enough to carve with basic tools, yet strong enough to hold its shape over centuries. Rain and wind shaped it into strange formations, fairy chimneys. Conical towers mushroom like spires. The entire region looked like something torn from a dream or a different planet. But ancient people didn't just marvel at the rock, they worked with it. Early settlers realized that this volcanic stone was a gift. They could carve out homes, chapels, storage rooms, even entire complexes without lumber or bricks, and unlike surface dwellings. These stone chambers stayed cool in the scorching summers and warm during freezing winters. Above ground, they carved churches into cliff faces. But below ground, that's where the real magic happened. It likely began with simple caves, small hideaways to store food, to escape heat, or to shelter from storms. But over time, as threats grew and communities expanded, those caves grew too. They evolved into interconnected rooms, then levels, then networks. And once the digging started, it didn't stop. Entire societies vanished beneath the soil, carving deeper and deeper, not randomly, but with intention. Tunnels connected homes to kitchens, stables to wells, rooms to chapels. They created ventilation shafts that reached the surface and filtered fresh air through multiple stories. They even dug vertical staircases wide enough for people and livestock, yet narrow enough to defend. What's truly incredible is how ancient these structures may be. While many underground cities were expanded during the Byzantine era, some archaeologists believe that the original levels, especially in places like Derinkuyu and Kamakla, could date back to the Hittite Empire or even earlier, around 2000 BCE. This land invited transformation, and the people of Cappadocia responded by shaping it, not with machines, but with patience, vision, and survival in mind. The earth wasn't just a foundation. It was a shelter, a fortress, a second sky, only inverted and filled with secrets. But what exactly were they hiding from? That's the question we explore next. Beneath the quiet town of Derinkuyu lies something extraordinary, a city. Not above the earth, but deep beneath it. A city that no one even knew existed until 1963, when a man doing simple renovations in his home knocked down a wall and found a dark tunnel stretching beyond sight. That tunnel led to chambers. The chambers led to corridors. Staircases spiraled downward into the rock, leading from room to room, level to level, until eventually explorers found themselves standing 18 stories beneath the surface. They had uncovered Derinkuyu, the largest and deepest underground city ever found in Cappadocia and possibly the world. What archaeologists found was staggering. This wasn't a temporary hideout or an emergency shelter. Derinkuyu was a living city, carved entirely out of volcanic stone. It had homes, churches, communal kitchens, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, schools, and even a baptismal chamber. It could house an estimated 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It was engineered with remarkable precision. Massive rolling stone doors shaped like millstones could be pushed to seal off tunnels in case of attack. These weren't simple blocks. They were perfectly fitted, movable from the inside, and nearly impossible to force open from the outside. Ventilation shafts snaked upward through the rock, delivering fresh air to the deepest levels. Wells accessed underground aquifers to provide water without surfacing. There was even a mission school, complete with study rooms, suggesting that this city wasn't just about survival. It was about continuity, teaching, worship, and community. But here's what makes Derinkuyu so mysterious. We don't really know who first built it or why. Some believe it was expanded by early Christians fleeing Roman or Arab persecution. Others argue the foundations are far older, perhaps dating back to the Phrygians or even the Hittites, thousands of years before Christ. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to disappear underground? Was it to escape invaders, as many believe? Or was the threat not human at all? Derinkuyu holds no inscriptions, no names, no definitive timeline, just rooms, tunnels, and questions. And even today, much of it remains unexplored. Because the deeper you go, the less it feels like a city, and the more it feels like something else. To build downward is far more complex than building up. There's no sunlight, no scaffolding, no wide open skies, just solid stone and shadow. And yet the architects of Cappadocia's underground cities didn't just dig. They designed with remarkable intelligence and precision, creating spaces that could support thousands of lives for months, maybe even years at a time. These cities weren't chaotic tunnels burrowed in panic. They were carefully planned systems, layered like an onion, each level with a distinct purpose. Living quarters were closer to the surface, allowing quicker access to the outside when danger passed. Deeper levels housed kitchens, workshops, food storage, and livestock pens strategically placed to reduce the risk of contamination or fire spreading through the city. One of the most ingenious features was the ventilation system. Long vertical shafts were carved through the rock to allow air to circulate through as many as 18 underground levels. Some shafts were over 50 meters deep, yet so well placed that fresh air could reach even the lowest chambers without fans, without electricity, just gravity and brilliant design. Water was another key to survival. The cities were built around natural aquifers. Wells could be accessed from within, ensuring that even in a siege, residents wouldn't need to emerge for water. In some cities, the well shafts were sealed off from the surface entirely to prevent poisoning by attackers. There were communication tunnels too, some leading to smaller satellite chambers, others connecting to nearby underground cities. In times of danger, messages or people could be moved through the earth itself, and the defense mechanisms were both simple and effective narrow corridors that forced invaders to approach single file. Trap doors that could be dropped. Hidden escape routes leading into valleys or riverbeds. Most famously, the rolling stone doors. Massive round slabs that could be rolled into place to seal off a passage in seconds. From the outside, they looked like part of the wall. From the inside, they were a last line of defense. Every decision, every design pointed to one truth. These cities were built for survival, not for days, not for weeks, but for long-term habitation under extreme threat, which raises the question, what kind of danger required this level of preparation? And was it ever truly gone? For centuries, scholars have asked the same haunting question. Who were the people of Cappadocia hiding from? What kind of threat drove entire populations to dig into the earth, not just for shelter, but to live? The most common theory points to invaders. Central Anatolia was a crossroads of empires. From the Assyrians to the Persians, from the Romans to the Byzantines, the region was constantly under threat. Later, Arab raids during the early Islamic period would push Christian communities to seek refuge underground. Derinkuyu and Kaimakla may have become sanctuaries during these waves of violence, allowing people to disappear into the rock and wait for danger to pass. But there's a problem. The depth, complexity, and sheer scale of these underground cities suggest they weren't built in a rush. This wasn't a desperate act. It was a long-term plan requiring generations of digging, engineering, and refinement. Some of the deepest chambers appear to predate Christianity entirely. So, who built the first layers? Some historians trace the earliest tunnels back to the Hittite Empire nearly 4,000 years ago. Others suggest the Phrygians may have expanded them, but beyond these educated guesses, the record grows silent. There are no inscriptions, no carvings, no direct evidence telling us who first vanished beneath the surface or what they were running from. That's where the theories begin. Some believe these cities were built not to escape other people, but something else. Natural disasters, solar events, even ancient warfare that may have scarred the skies and poisoned the land. More fringe theories go deeper, suggesting that the cities were built to hide from beings, not of this world. The kind of beings spoken of in myths across cultures. Sky gods, watchers, destroyers. The idea is tempting if you look at the level of secrecy, the air shafts disguised from view, the escape routes, the stone doors. It almost feels like the builders were trying to disappear completely, as if whatever they feared didn't just attack, it hunted. While these ideas remain speculative, they reflect a central mystery. No matter how many layers archaeologists uncover, the core question remains unanswered. Who were they hiding from? And did it work? Because sometimes the deeper you dig, the darker the truth becomes. Imagine living not just a day, but months, maybe even years, entirely underground. No sunlight, no open skies, just stone walls, flickering oil lamps, and the ever-present hush of life beneath the earth. This was reality for thousands in Cappadocia during times of threat. But what did daily life actually look like inside these vast underground cities? Despite the darkness, these spaces weren't lifeless. They were alive with routine, carefully structured for communal survival. Families lived in multi-room compartments. Kitchens were located on lower levels to manage smoke more efficiently, and food was cooked in clay ovens. The scent of baked bread likely mixed with the damp smell of stone and livestock. There were churches and chapels carved with crosses and altars, some even containing intricate frescoes. People didn't just survive here. They prayed, worshipped, and practiced rituals. There were communal areas for meetings, schooling rooms for children, and long corridors that echoed with voices and footsteps. Lighting came from oil lamps, dozens of them scattered along the passageways. Smoke was channeled through cleverly designed shafts that doubled as ventilation. Yet life here wasn't easy. Fresh air was limited, darkness was constant, and silence, when it fell, was absolute. Water was drawn from deep wells tunneled into aquifers. Grain was stored in sealed chambers to prevent spoilage. Wine presses and olive oil vats have been found carved into the rock, suggesting that even underground, life had flavor and ritual. The cities were built for the long haul. They weren't a last resort. They were a prepared reality. Livestock, sheep, goats, chickens were kept in dedicated pens, usually near the entrance levels for easier management and ventilation. Their presence served a dual purpose, food and warmth. Despite the confined spaces, the builders understood the psychology of survival. Rooms were laid out in ways that gave families privacy, while shared spaces created a sense of community. Life underground wasn't just about hiding, it was about preserving a way of life, a culture, and a people. It's a humbling thought. While wars raged above, entire civilizations continued below, hidden in silence. People married, taught their children, mourned their dead, all within stone chambers lit by fire. To live underground was not to live in fear. It was to live with intention. Cappadocia's underground cities weren't isolated pockets of refuge. They were part of something much bigger. Beneath the valleys and hills of this volcanic region lies a vast network of tunnels, chambers, and hidden passageways that seem to connect multiple cities together. Derinkuyu, Kamaklu, Oskanak, and others may not have just been separate settlements, but pieces of a unified subterranean civilization. Some of these tunnels stretch for kilometers, weaving beneath the countryside like veins under skin, narrow, winding, and often no wider than a man's shoulders. They were likely used for secret movement, escape routes, or even transporting messages and supplies from one underground complex to another. Derinkuyu and Kamakla, two of the largest cities, are believed to be linked by such a tunnel, nearly 9 kilometers long. That's not just impressive engineering. It's evidence of coordinated planning on a scale rarely seen in ancient architecture, if true. It means multiple cities could support one another in times of siege or crisis, functioning almost like an underground federation. But these tunnels weren't just for utility, they were also defensive. Built with multiple bottlenecks, blind turns, and choke points, they forced any pursuer to enter one at a time, making them easy to trap or ambush. Many tunnels were rigged with trapdoors and stone corks that could be rolled into place to block intruders. Still, the full extent of these networks remains unknown. New passageways are still being discovered. In 2014, an even larger underground complex was accidentally uncovered beneath Nevsur, possibly dwarfing even Derinkuyu. Archaeologists believe it could contain dozens of levels, aqueducts, places of worship, and countless more tunnels yet to be mapped. What were these tunnels truly for? Were they simple escape routes? Or the infrastructure of a society built to live without ever being seen? The more we uncover, the more we realize Cappadocia's underground isn't just a collection of homes and halls. It's a system planned, connected, hidden beneath our feet for thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, there's still more waiting to be discovered. Entire cities buried not by time, but by intention. Because in Cappadocia, the earth doesn't just hide secrets, it protects them. Despite decades of excavation and study, Cappadocia's underground cities remain wrapped in mystery. The stone walls may be silent, but the questions echo louder than ever. Not just how they were built, but why. And when historical answers fall short, myths and alternative theories rush in to fill the void. One of the most enduring questions. It is about the true age of these cities. Conventional archaeology ties their major expansion to the Byzantine period, when Christians sought refuge from invading forces. But some researchers believe that the earliest tunnels and chambers are far older, possibly dating back 4,000 years or more. If that's true, what kind of threat existed so long ago that would drive people underground? Enter the theories. Some suggest the subterranean cities were emergency shelters from natural cataclysms, massive floods, solar flares, volcanic winters, or ancient climatic disasters. The layout of the cities, self-sufficient, hidden, and sealed, could be interpreted as long-term survival bunkers prepared for environmental collapse. Others look to cosmic explanations, Ancient astronaut theorists argue that early civilizations may have built these cities to hide from entities they describe as gods, beings who descended from the sky and ruled with fearsome power. Could the underground cities have been a shield from something not of this earth? One local legend speaks of giants that once roamed the surface, driving people below. Others tell of fire from the heavens and enemies that came with burning eyes. To the modern ear, these may sound like metaphors, or memories distorted by centuries of oral tradition, but they hint at something terrifying enough to push entire cultures into the rock. There are also theories tied to the symbolism of the earth itself. In some ancient traditions, descending into the ground represents a journey into the underworld, a metaphorical death and rebirth. Were these cities spiritual sanctuaries, places of ritual transformation, or were they never abandoned, but forgotten on purpose? The truth is, no single theory explains it all. The scale, the age, the precision, it doesn't fully fit into our existing historical framework. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Because sometimes what lies hidden isn't just history. It's the edge of something we were never meant to understand. Today, visitors to Cappadocia walk through dreamlike landscapes, over valleys carved by wind, past fairy chimneys glowing orange in the evening sun. Hot air balloons drift quietly overhead, but beneath their feet, the ground is hollow. Beneath the beauty lies a world carved in darkness, one still holding its breath after thousands of years. The underground cities are now open to tourists. Visitors descend narrow stairwells, pass through low-arched tunnels, and stand in rooms where people once lived in silence, waiting for danger to pass. And yet, only a fraction has been uncovered. Some chambers remain sealed, some tunnels collapse into shadow, some doorways lead nowhere. Or so it seems. These aren't just ruins. They're testaments. Proof that people will do whatever it takes to survive, to protect their children, to preserve their beliefs, to vanish when the world turns hostile. And in that act of vanishing, they left behind a kind of message, not written in language, but in stone. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories. But we know this. They were planners, engineers, and visionaries. They created something that could endure centuries of silence, something that might have been meant never to be found. Cappadocia reminds us that history isn't always on the surface sometimes. The most profound truths are buried on purpose, hidden from conquerors, hidden from the curious, hidden maybe from time itself. And what remains? Mystery. Mystery in the perfect fit of the rolling stone doors. Mystery in the air shafts that still pull wind from the deep. Mystery in the miles of unexplored tunnels, still untouched, still dark. Maybe the real purpose of Cappadocia's underground world will never be known. Maybe it isn't meant to be, but as you walk through those chambers, with the weight of rock above and the silence pressing in, you feel something ancient stirring, a presence, a whisper, not of fear, but of endurance. Because when the world above was chaos, the people of Cappadocia looked down and chose to survive in the dark together. And the earth, it seems, has kept their secret well. To the ancient world, sleep was not an escape from reality. It was an entryway into something deeper. Dreams weren't dismissed as random thoughts or figments of imagination. They were taken seriously. In fact, they were considered messages, sometimes warnings, sometimes prophecies, and often direct communications from gods or spirits for ancient civilizations. The boundary between the physical and spiritual world wasn't sharp. It was porous, and in sleep that boundary grew thin. The act of dreaming was sacred, mysterious, and often terrifying. It was during those quiet, vulnerable hours of the night that the divine could reach into the human mind, and what it whispered or roared could shape the course of a king's decision, a priest's ritual, or a city's fate. In almost every early culture, from the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the temples of Egypt and the academies of Greece, dreams held an elevated status. People believed they were being visited not by fantasy, but by real forces with real consequences. Dreams could foretell war. They could reveal betrayal. They could offer healing or demand sacrifice. Ignoring a powerful dream wasn't just seen as foolish, it was dangerous. The dreamer, then, was not just a sleeper. They were a messenger, a vessel temporarily open to cosmic truths. and in some cases that dreamer became a prophet, chosen by the gods. Entire professions were devoted to understanding dreams. Priests, shamans, oracles, and seers all learned to read the symbols that emerged in the night. A snake in a dream could be a symbol of transformation or a deadly omen. A rising sun could promise victory or deception, depending on the context. Each culture had its own codes, but the belief was universal. Dreams mattered. Even today, fragments of that ancient wisdom linger. We speak of following our dreams or waking up to a realization. But in the ancient world, dreams weren't poetic expressions. They were maps, warnings, sacred intelligence delivered while the conscious mind slept. This was the world before Freud, before REM cycles, before science tried to measure what the ancients already feared and revered. Because to them, the dream world was real, and to walk through, it was to walk with gods. The first civilization to leave written records of dreams were the Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. They didn't view dreams as random images. To them, dreams were direct transmissions from the divine, often complex, symbolic, and deeply consequential. Among the ruins of their cities, archaeologists uncovered clay tablets etched with dreams, some personal, others political. Dream interpretation wasn't a novelty. It was a structured practice, taught, studied, and respected. Sumerian kings had court dream interpreters, men trained to decipher the messages of the gods, and whose interpretations could influence the fate of entire cities. One of the most famous examples of this ancient dream culture lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest literary works. In it, both Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu experience vivid, symbolic dreams. Before embarking on their dangerous journey to slay the monster, Gilgamesh dreams of celestial battles and collapsing mountains, and visions his mother and priests into, interpreted as divine warnings and veiled prophecies. These dreams weren't ignored. They were consulted as sacred guidance. The Sumerians believed that there were two types of dreams, one sent by gods to help or instruct, and others that were empty, simply echoes of the day. Determining which was which required the wisdom of a priest or diviner, people who could read omens, symbols, and patterns hidden in the imagery of sleep. Temples often had special chambers where priests or even kings would sleep in hopes of receiving divine visions. This ritual practice, known later in other cultures as incubation, may have originated with the Sumerians. These sacred dreams were seen as oracles, sometimes even more trusted than waking signs. Dreams could also serve as political tools. A ruler claiming divine dreams could strengthen his legitimacy or justify major decisions. The gods told me in a dream wasn't just spiritual, it was power. In the Sumerian worldview, the universe was alive with meaning, and dreams were its language. Every image, whether a storm, a lion, or a falling star, carried cosmic significance. And in a land where gods walked among men, to dream was to listen. To ignore those dreams was to risk the wrath of the heavens themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not just messages. They were portals, pathways to the gods, glimpses into the afterlife, and sometimes instructions for the living. In a culture obsessed with eternity, sleep wasn't merely a time of rest. It was a rehearsal for death, and dreams were communications from the realm beyond. Egyptian texts show that dreams were considered both deeply personal and powerfully prophetic. Like the Sumerians, Egyptians categorized dreams into two kinds: truth dreams, sent by the gods or spirits to guide, heal, or warn, and false dreams, which were misleading or born of bodily imbalance. Temples dedicated to gods like Serapis and Thoth were known to practice dream incubation. Worshippers would sleep within temple walls, hoping to receive divine dreams. These temple dreams were often recorded, interpreted by priests, and even carved into stone. In some cases, a person might receive not just visions, but healing through dreams. One of the most fascinating artifacts is the Ramesside Dream Book, dating to around 1300 BCE. This papyrus scroll is essentially a catalog of dream symbols and their meanings. It lists over 100 dreams, each paired with an interpretation. For example, if a man sees himself eating crocodile flesh, it means he will gain power over his enemies. Another entry warns that dreaming of drinking warm beer means impending sorrow. These interpretations were taken seriously. Pharaohs, generals, and priests all sought the counsel of dream interpreters who acted as intermediaries between the dreamer and the divine. Egyptian mythology also linked dreams to the car, the soul. During sleep, the car was believed to leave the body and travel to other realms. What it saw there returned as dreams. Sometimes these were visions of loved ones long dead, or encounters with gods bearing messages. Occasionally, dreams were considered visits from malevolent spirits, and protective spells were recited to keep such forces at bay. Even in tomb inscriptions, dreams appear. Kings describe how gods came to them in the night, offering divine sanction for their rule or guidance for their legacy. In the land of pyramids and gods, dreams weren't illusions, they were revelations. And to dream was to step briefly into the eternal. In ancient Greece, dreams occupied a space between medicine, mythology, and philosophy. To the Greeks, dreams were more than personal. They were cosmic messages delivered by gods, heroes, or even forces from the underworld. But unlike earlier civilizations, the Greeks also began to ask why we dream, planting the first seeds of psychological thought. The most sacred place for dream revelation in Greece was the Asclepion, a healing temple dedicated to the god Asclepius, the divine physician. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean to sleep inside these sanctuaries in a process called incubation. Before sleeping, they would bathe, fast, pray, and sometimes offer sacrifices, all to prepare their bodies and souls to receive healing dreams. In these dreams, it was said that Asclepius himself would appear, diagnosing their illness or prescribing a cure, sometimes even performing dream surgery. Temple priests, called therapeutae, interpreted the dreams and applied treatments based on what the gods revealed. This blend of medicine and mysticism was highly respected, and it worked, or at least seemed to. The walls of Asclepions were covered in inscriptions thanking the gods for miraculous recoveries. But dreams in Greece were not only for healing, they were political and prophetic too. In Homer's epics, dreams come directly from Zeus in the Iliad. The god sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to influence battle strategy. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates of dreams, one of horn, from which true dreams emerge, and one of ivory, from which comes lies. Dream interpretation became a respected craft. Philosophers like Aristotle and Heraclitus pondered the nature of dreams, wondering whether they came from divine origins or simply the stirrings of the soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a 2nd century dream interpreter, wrote the Honoro Critica, a 5-book manual on how to decode dreams based on profession, gender, status, and symbolism. His work was referenced for centuries. The Greeks believed that during sleep the soul loosened its grip on the body, floating in a liminal state where it could glimpse deeper truths. Whether sent by gods or born from inner reflection, dreams were never meaningless to the Greeks. To dream was not just to see visions, it was to momentarily touch the divine mind. In the ancient world, dreams weren't just reflections of the mind. They were often believed to be prophecies. Many civilizations saw the dream state as a space where time unraveled, allowing the future to bleed into the present. To dream was sometimes to witness fate before it arrived, and that knowledge carried both great power and deep responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with rulers, generals, and prophets who acted based on their dreams. One wrong interpretation could cost a kingdom. One correct reading could change the course of history. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial omens, falling stars, dark suns, or blood-red rivers were seen as signs of coming war or disaster. Priests kept detailed records of these dreams, looking for patterns that might predict the fate of empires. These records weren't just stored, they were consulted during times of crisis. The Egyptians also viewed dreams as divine warnings. Pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed his reign was foretold in a dream, one in which the Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared the desert sand from its body. Whether fact or political storytelling, that dream secured his legitimacy in the eyes of the people. In the Greek world, prophetic dreams played out on the battlefield and in political chambers. Before major decisions, leaders sought omens, either through dream incubation or by consulting oracles like those at Delphi, who often dreamt as part of their rituals. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before conquering Persia, taking it as a sign of divine favor. But prophecy wasn't only for kings. Everyday people also believed dreams could foretell marriage, childbirth, illness, or death. Artemidorus's Anaira Critica included thousands of such interpretations. Dreaming of losing teeth, a death in the family, dreaming of flight, a sudden change in fortune. The belief in prophetic dreams gave ordinary people a sense of access to the divine, a glimpse into the hidden threads of fate, but it also created anxiety. What have you missed? What have you misunderstood? In a world where gods whispered in dreams, sleeping wasn't just a private act. It was a conversation with destiny. In the ancient world, healing didn't always come from herbs or blades. It often came from dreams. Sacred healing sanctuaries, known as dream temples, existed across many ancient cultures here. The sick didn't just seek medicine, they sought divine intervention, and the treatment began not with potions, but with sleep. The most famous of these were the Asclepians in ancient Greece, dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. But this wasn't a Greek invention alone. Earlier civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia also believed that dreams could reveal cures or offer spiritual purification. These temples weren't places to escape illness. They were places to encounter the source of healing, often through a divine dream. The process was called incubation. A pilgrim would purify their body through fasting, bathing, or ritual sacrifice before lying down in a sacred chamber, usually at night. The goal was simple but profound: to dream with intent, to open the self to divine contact in these dreams. Gods or spirits would appear, offering advice, cures, or even performing dream surgeries. Some dreamed of snakes coiling around their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius. Others saw themselves bathed in light or touched by divine hands. When they awoke, temple priests, trained dream interpreters, would listen, translate, and prescribe actions based on the dream. Sometimes it meant drinking a special brew, walking a certain path, or offering thanks with a sacrifice. In some cases, the dream itself was considered healing. These temples weren't isolated or fringe. Thousands of people visited them. Inscriptions etched into temple walls speak of miraculous recoveries, blindness cured, fevers broken, pain lifted. Whether the healings were physical, psychosomatic, or spiritual, the power of belief in the dream was undeniable. Dream healing crossed cultures. In Egypt, people visited temples of Serapis or Imhotep, seeking similar nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, temples to Gula, the goddess of medicine, offered spaces for dream divination and ritual sleep. What united all these practices was a shared belief. The body and soul were connected, and the soul spoke most clearly in dreams. Healing wasn't just about the flesh, it was about harmony between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of silence, dreams weren't just seen as stories, they were medicine. In the ancient world, the realm of dreams was not only a place of prophecy or healing, it was also a space where the dead could speak. Many ancient civilizations believed that dreams provided a rare and sacred moment when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. To dream of a departed loved one was not seen as a simple expression of grief or memory. It was often believed that the spirit of the deceased had truly returned, bearing messages, warnings, or unresolved requests. These dream encounters were powerful, emotional, and deeply significant. In Egypt, where the afterlife was central to belief, dreams were thought to offer a direct link to the underworld, the soul or Kar. Was believed to travel freely during sleep, even visiting the dead. If a deceased family member appeared in a dream, it could mean they were displeased, in need of offerings, or simply reaching out with guidance. Egyptians sometimes wrote letters to the dead, left in tombs or shrines, asking for protection or help, hoping the request would be answered in a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the dead were treated with reverence and caution. The dead were believed to retain power in the afterlife, and a dream visitation could be a sign that something was amiss, perhaps a neglected burial ritual or an unfulfilled vow. These dreams were often followed by ritual purification or offerings to set things right. The Greeks also took dreams of the dead seriously. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld and speaks with the spirits of the fallen. a vision that mirrors what many believe could happen during sleep. The philosopher Heraclitus once said the waking have one world in common, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own. That private world was where the dead could slip through. Even beyond Europe and the Middle East, many cultures held similar views that the dead were not entirely gone and that dreams were their language. When the voice of a lost parent or child spoke in the night, it wasn't poetic. It was real. To the ancients, sleep was not a place to forget. It was where the past could still reach out and sometimes ask to be remembered. To ancient civilizations, dreams weren't just messages. They were puzzles, rich with symbols, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs. Dreams were believed to carry coded language from the divine. Interpreting them wasn't easy. It required training, intuition, and often ritual. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, professional dream interpreters operated almost like priests or shamans. They studied vast collections of dream records, memorized symbol meanings, and knew how to distinguish between a true dream and a meaningless one. Their interpretations could influence public policy, medicine, and even warfare. Across cultures, certain dream symbols appeared again and again, and they were rarely literal. A snake might mean danger in one dream, transformation in another. Seeing fire could be a warning of destruction or purification. Flying might symbolize the soul breaking free of earthly burdens or a longing to escape something in waking life. In Egypt, dream books outlined hundreds of these symbols. Dreaming of drowning might signal an emotional storm to come. Seeing oneself blind could foretell a spiritual awakening or a painful truth hidden in plain sight. These are not guesses. They were part of a vast ancient language of symbols refined over generations. In Greece, Artemidorus of Daldis compiled the Eunerocritica, a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He emphasized that dream interpretation wasn't universal. Context mattered. A farmer dreaming of a flood meant something very different than a sailor dreaming the same. The Honora Critica is one of the earliest known texts to suggest that personal experience shapes dream meaning, a remarkably modern idea for the 2nd century. Dream interpretation was also tied to divination. Dreams were seen as one thread in a web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might consult oracles, draw lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify what they had seen. Some even kept dream journals inscribed on papyrus or clay, not just for personal insight, but to share with their community. For ancient people, symbols weren't just subconscious images. They were keys, part of a divine language whispered in sleep, and understanding that language meant unlocking the will of the gods, the forces of fate, and the secrets of the soul. To the ancients, a dream wasn't just a story, it was a message in code sent from the stars. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting fragments, strange images quickly forgotten after we wake, or at best, material for therapists and artists. But to the ancients, dreams were far more than mental noise. They were sacred, structured, and respected. They offered guidance, healing, connection with the dead, and glimpses of the divine. Dreams were a part of the fabric of life, woven into medicine, religion, and governance. So what happened? As science and rationalism rose, particularly in the post-Enlightenment dreams were reclassified. No longer messages from the gods, they became neurological byproducts, electrical impulses, memory fragments, or emotional processing. The sacred became clinical. The symbol was reduced to chemical. But even now, in moments of grief, change, or deep intuition, dreams still matter. We still search them for meaning. A dream of a lost loved one can bring closure. A recurring nightmare can reflect stress or a truth we don't want to face. Modern psychology, beginning with Freud and Jung, tried to reclaim some of that ancient understanding, recognizing that dreams hold power, even if we no longer call it divine. What the ancients understood is that the dream world is not separate from life. It is a mirror reflecting not only our fears and desires, but something bigger, something eternal. Whether it was a god speaking from the darkness, a warning about tomorrow's storm, or the voice of a parent long buried, dreams offered something society could not provide during waking hours. A conversation with the unknown. And maybe that's what we've lost. The humility to listen to what sleep might be trying to tell us. Across time and civilization, one belief remained constant. Dreams are not random. They are doors. And the question isn't whether they're real, it's whether we're willing to walk through them. In every ancient temple, every scroll and tablet, we hear the same whisper. Pay attention. Close your eyes not to forget the world, but to understand it. Because in the silence of night, when the noise of the world fades, we might just hear what the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks already knew, that dreams are not echoes of the mind. They are the language of the soul.